they're really hurting aftermath of the election. And I've been particularly heartbroken to hear about the death of Capitol Police Officer Howard Evengood. He was protecting the Senate since 2005, stationed by the door of my office. My prayers are with loved ones. But, you know, when the insurrectionists, when they came to storm our Capitol on January 6th, they came armed not only with weapons, but also with mere weeks before International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the world watched horror as a rioter inside the Capitol proudly wore a Camp Auschwitz shirt as he and others violently forward on the House and the Senate floors. All the while, the rioters, they're waving Confederate flags, their nooses on the front lawn, they're verbally assaulting a Jewish reporter outside the Capitol, saying, "You are cattle." That refers to cattle cars that were used to transport Jews to Nazi death during the Holocaust. This violent attack on the Capitol featured followers from anti-Semitic QAnon conspiracy. So, Mr. Conti, on January 4th, Metro Police Department arrested Enrique Chirrillo, leader of the racist anti-Semitic Proud Boys hate. FBI claims the next day it shared with MPD concrete intelligence about extremist plans, violence on January 6th, including specific threats on members of Congress, maps of the tunnels under Capitol complex. If MPD was tracking extremist, potentially violent white supremacist activity, then what exactly did you know on January 5th, and why didn't you alert anyone?
Thank you for that question. What the FBI sent mail on January 5th was in the form of email. I would certainly think that something as violent as insurrection of the Capitol warrant, a phone call or something. But as Chief Sun mentioned earlier, the information that was sent it was uncorroborated information, raw information that we had, that we received through the same lines, the JTTF. That information was not fully vetted and had not been sent through the chains of the Metropolitan Police Department. The Metropolitan Police Department was prepared for was the larger violence and demonstrations that we expected to see in our city.
That's fine. I have to ask Mr. Sun the same question now. What did you know as of Tuesday night, January 5th? Because I have a follow-up for both on this one. So quickly, Mr. Sun, what did you know on January 5th? And were you alarmed or not alarmed? What did you expect?
So yeah, I was concerned. We had the intelligence that was coming out, intelligence that we'd before. Again, keep in mind, intelligence assessments that we had developed end of December, beginning of one for January 3rd were very, very similar. They just provided a little bit more specificity. So we had already been for threat for violence, threat for armed possible protesting, and that's what we were planning for. Now, if you're referring to the Norfolk letter again, I just became aware that the department was aware of that 4 hours ago. So on the 6th or the 5th, 4th, I was not aware of this.
So you're saying that there's a breakdown between you and the FBI because we have rallies, protests, and things happen in Washington all the time. How many could both of you just maybe give a guess, how many do you think are usually with armed insurrectionists or come heavily armed out of the hundreds, perhaps thousands of rallies that we see in Washington through the year?
You know, the last three incidents, the first two MAGA rallies, men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department recovered firearms from several people who were attending the demonstrations at the first MAGA rally as well as the second one. Aside from that, those have been really the only demonstrations where we've seen individuals coming armed.
Well, do you think this was an intelligence breakdown or a resource issue?
I think that the intelligence did not make it where it needed to be. You think the FBI did not raise the level they needed to at the police department? In your mind, we received it in the form of an email that came as an alert bulletin, 7:00 p.m. the day before. Our posture our posture as the Metropolitan Police Department, again, I think, is reflected in our deployment in terms of not just the National Guard that was deployed, but as well as other officers from surrounding jurisdictions. That reflected the seriousness that we took with respect to the threats that we were expecting to see in the city.
Mr. Sund, can you tell me, do you think this was a resource issue or intelligence breakdown or something else? If you be brief, this is very important.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. I'll be very brief. It was part of my introduction. I think it was more than just the Norfolk letter. I think we need to look at the whole entire intelligence community and the view they have on some of the domestic extremists and the effect that they have. I look at this as a intelligence problem that impacts.
So what information would you have had to have heard to have raised up the flag to get more resources for the Capitol Police? Because thank goodness, I mean, we saw loss of life, and thank goodness there wasn't more, but one is too many. So what is your threshold then? What should be the threshold to protect the Capitol and protect your officers?
I did reach out to the Washington, D.C. police to coordinate resources, and I did also go to both the House and Senate Sergeant Arms to request the National Guard.
And okay. Mr. Conti, I think I have 5 seconds and we can take this off the record, but I believe there's some plans by QAnon for something to happen to the Capitol on March 4th. I want to hear what steps we're taking to protect the Capitol on March 4th from any more violent extremists. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have you talk to him about that later. Senator Warner has arrived via video, and I also want to mention Senator Peters will work with our witnesses for restroom breaks and the like, and let us know so that we don't want to take a long break, but I can imagine you need a break at some point here. So, Senator Warner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for hearing today. We talked a little bit about deployment or lack of deployment of the National Guard. One of the questions, I guess, or frankly, or the fact the district did not have the ability to bring guard table because of, frankly, the fact that they're not a state. Mayor Bowser is not treated totally fair fashion in this. Maybe outside your lane, but her inability to bring the guard to the table, and actually any of you on the panel, that to me is a reflection of disempowerment on a going forward basis, at least in terms of being able to deploy the guard. Shouldn't the mayor of the District of Columbia have the ability to do that without all the additional hurdles they have to go through in terms of checklist?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that.
Anybody else want to answer on that question? Well,
yes, sir. I'm happy to add in. I think we have an established process for the Capitol Police to make the request through the Capitol Police Board that is also equally as effective.
So again, I feel like the long-term discrimination against the district that we've seen it in some of the COVID legislation where they did not receive the same kind of level of support other states did. We saw it play out real time in terms of on January 6th, the hurdles from the previous administration. I actually have concerns whether the deployment of the Guard was affirmatively slowed down. I hope we in the Congress will support of DC statehood. I'd like to see that move forward, but even short of that, trying to ensure that the mayor has appropriate powers going forward. I know there were some questions already raised about the FBI and whether that the intel that came out of the Norfolk FBI office ever fully relayed to all of you individuals. But can you talk more generally about the FBI's responsiveness, sharing of intelligence? I had a number of conversations. I called Director Wray on Monday, the 4th, trying to express concerns that there might be this kind of activity. I never expected this level of. I had a number of conversations with senior FBI leadership the 5th through the 6th. I candidly was in the thought that I could have been fully informed of all of what was going to come to pass, but I felt like the FBI felt that they were in better shape in terms of intel and preparation than what seemed to be the case. And I'd like each of you to comment on how well you felt FBI did in terms of sharing intelligence and then coordinating when the actual activities played out.
So I'll go ahead and, did you want me to address that first?
Yeah, I mean, I can't see where y'all are, so
Yeah,
if
no,
every
so-
one of you can take a crack at.
I'll go ahead and first. I think the relationship we have with the FBI is outstanding. I'm with Alton and my time here. Relationship get better. Construct that we have that's very similar to some of the other major cities is having the terrorism task force involved with that.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, there's news flying 16 ways to Sunday, every different direction. The United States Senate is holding hearings right now on the insurrection on January 6th. The Senate Homeland Security Committee, chaired by Gary Peters of Michigan, and the Senate Rules and Administration Committee, chaired by Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, both previous guests on this program on numerous occasions, are digging into what happened on the 6th. And we will be carrying much of that live on this program. I do want to cut away from that for just a moment, though. First, Representative Bill Pascrell Jr. is on the line with us. He's a member of the United States House of Representatives, represents the 9th District of New Jersey. He is the chair of the House Ways and Means Subcommittee on Oversight. His website, Pascrell, pascrell.house.gov. You can tweet him at Bill Pascrell. Is on the line with us, and he's part of the group that's looking into Trump's tax returns, if I have this right. Representative Pascrell, thanks so much for joining us today. What is the consequence in your mind, or how consequential was this Supreme Court decision yesterday saying that, yes, in fact, the tax returns of Donald Trump and all the associated bookkeeping and things that go along with it, including communications, can be turned over to Cyrus Vance, the District Attorney of New York? And how is that going to affect you guys and the work you're doing?
Well, it's interesting. There are a number of cases, Tom, and hello, and thanks for having me on. There are a number of cases.
Pleasure.
I've been on this for years. Some might say I'm a slow learner. But when I get my hands on something and I believe in it, I'm going to stick with it. And you're going to face victories, and you're going to face defeats while you're after the truth. And I stayed with this through 19 resolutions on the House floor and on the floor when we had our Ways and Means committees many times. And those resolutions all pointed to transparency. We've had the president since Nixon provide for us their tax returns. Very few problems since that turn. Since Nixon put up a barrier, and since Nixon, remember, said, the government has the right to know if the president's a crook. Well, thank you, but we have a right to know because we want to avoid conflicts of interest. We want to avoid different situations that have occurred because of one's private life, one's business life. We're not out to simply peek behind the covers here, because that's not our objective, and I can speak for myself. That certainly wasn't my objective. When I started this out, Tom, 5 years ago now, on November the 19th, 2017, when I started out with this hearing, having those hearings through the Ways and Means Committee, I went first to the chairman at the time. The Republicans were in the majority, Kevin Brady of Texas, and asked him, let's do this together so I can't be accused of, and Democrats can't be accused of, trying to make this a partisan issue. Your guy said he was going to give us these, and he said he had an audit, and he couldn't give us these, and that audit is still going on, Tom. So it's really BS when you look at it objectively. And I think that's what the government needs more of, transparency. That's what we need. So we know who our public officials are, and we know if they're scheming in private to enrich themselves. And that's what much of what his 4 years was about, Trump enriching himself and his family and his corporation. So
well, he bragged about that during the primaries. Excuse me.
Right.
He said, I'll probably be the first person to ever run for president and make a profit doing it.
And he meant it. He meant it.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. And now the Supreme Court has ruled, we've waited for a long time, that the case in New York, and by the way, Tom, as an aside, on February the 19th, 2017, the famous year of the hoax of tax cuts and spreading them around to everybody, which was a joke. Talk about hoaxes. The president used that word more than anybody I ever known. And it was the biggest hoax we've ever seen. And they were turned out of office, remember, 2018. We need tax fairness. We need people to pay what really they should be paying depending upon their assets and their income. And we got to know for our president, if he doesn't have any secret deals with other foreign countries and companies in foreign countries. And we have every right to know that. And there is a law in the tax code, 6103, A to F. There is a law that states very specifically that there are 3 committees in the Congress that can ask for these tax cuts, not only from the president, but from anybody in the executive branch of government, going back to the Tea Party incident, which happened in 2024, which was 1924, which said that there are these 3 committees that can ask for the members of the executive branch of government for a reason, and then they can vote together if they get that permission to get the taxes to make them public. That's another step.
That was because of the Teapot Dome scandal back in the day.
Yeah, that's what came out of that Teapot Dome scandal when Secretary Fall, who was Secretary of the Interior at the time, was making his own private deals with public lands in Wyoming. Yep. And he was caught, Democrats were involved and Republicans were involved. They were going to have a party, I guess, on the oil reserves in naval territory, the United States Navy. That was probably the biggest scandal in the history of the country. This will be even bigger. I made that prediction many moons ago. So
yeah, I think you're right.
This was in New York. I said on that day that we're going after the tax returns that the states have probably a quicker chance or a better chance to get the taxes because they're not under federal rules, the courts themselves, and what their laws are, as long as they're not in conflict necessarily with federal law, that they can get these things even quicker. So that's what
Representative Pascrell. Forgive the interruption, but we're going to hit a hard break here in about a minute and a half. You are the chair of the House Ways and Means Subcommittee on Oversight. Is your committee going to be one of the committees that's going to be looking into Trump's tax returns, and how is Congress going to deal with this?
Well, that's interesting. Richie Neal, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Tommy, he brought this case during the election of last year in behalf of the Ways and Means Committee because we're one of the 3 committees that have the right under 6103 to go after anybody in the executive branch of government's taxes because we feel there may be something really to look at for the public good and to increase the possibilities of transparency. So Richie's waiting, and I talk to him all the time as my chairman, and many have criticized him for going slow on this, and I think he's been very methodical and has done the right thing. And I've been the big mouth about it, but I mean, Richie has been right on methodically as our chairman. And he's waiting for the courts to decide whether or not certain obstacles that have been put in the way by Mr. Trump are going to be set aside because they're meaningless and frivolous. So I'm waiting for our case to come forward too. But I said that the states were going to have a good chance, and here they are.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, in fact, it's coming out of New York. Representative Bill Pascrell Jr., the congressman representing the 9th District of New Jersey, chair of the House Ways and Means Subcommittee on Oversight, pascrell.house.gov, Twitter @Bill Pascrell. Representative Pascrell, thanks so much for dropping by today, and good luck with your work.
It's an honor, Tom. Keep up the good work. I'm up in Jersey, but I know all about you.
Thank you, sir. It's great talking with you.
Thom Hartmann Program.
Congressman Bill Pascrell. We're going to now rejoin the Joint Homeland Security Committee and Senate Rules and Administration Committee's hearings into what happened on January 6th.
Train for people trying to get into the building. We don't train for, when I said, an insurrection of thousands of
right.
And our officers do have less lethal capability that they carry with them. With hindsight being what it is from January 6th,
I'm not hearing the committee's hearings.
Training additional equipment to consider this type of attack.
I'm hearing them very faintly now.
Well, the challenge is we all watched this summer. In fact, this committee at Homeland Security had a hearing on the assaults on a federal courthouse in Portland and went through, and all of us saw for a month individuals just attack that courthouse day after day after day, and we saw the techniques that were used. Some of those same techniques were used by individuals that came in here. I'm not saying it was the same individuals. Some of those same techniques of trying to be able to work defense, to be able to find it, to be able to find a way to be able to attack officers. So challenge is that we saw that this was rising, I guess. People were watching on TV, people attacking a federal institution all summer long. It is a follow-up that we're going to have to do in the days ahead of how to be able to get less than lethal capability, find ways to be able to stop any kind of assault, a number of individuals. Yeah, appreciate your service. Appreciate very much officers that continue to be able to serve because they've not had a gap. They've not had a break since that time. No, you still interact with them. At least I hope you do. I would encourage you to pass on from us our gratitude. We're all looking at this as a hindsight 2020 saying, why couldn't you read the tea leaves at this particular scrap of intelligence that came in the night before? None of us saw it. So we're grateful for the service they continue to do, and let's find the lessons we can learn.
No, they're Board of Congress. They're a hell of a.
Okay, thank you, Senator Langford. Next up, thank you for your patience, Senator Carper.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Conte, as a former governor of the first state of Delaware, for 8 years, I recall numerous instances in which I called on the Delaware National Guard in emergencies. They could have been the floods, blizzard, ice storms, drought, you name it, more. I know the importance of the valiant work that our citizens have done decades in the first state, other states around the country. As we have learned, in contrast to every other state's National Guard in the country, the DC National Guard operates differently. And I'm convinced if someone had been able to activate the Delaware DC National Guard and have 1,000 or 2,000 guardsmen and women deployed at the Capitol in a timely way on the 6th of January, this destruction, this death and destruction. The leader of unlike the states of the 50 states that we have, the District of Columbia, unempowered to activate the DC National Guard during an emergency. That's one of the reasons why I've worked for years with Woman Eleanor Holmes Norton to support legislation to admit Washington, D.C. as our 51st state and to provide equal rights to the American over 700,000 people. Here's a question, Chief Conte, in your testimony, you highlight the request for DC National Guard assistance at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th would have been have been made by the U.S. Capitol Police with the consent of the U.S. Department of Defense. Can you just take a minute to explain that process and why Mayor Bowser is not able to request DC National Guard assistance when federal installations and property as well as human lives are threatened in the district? Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yeah, so the mayor does not have authority, National Guard, to include their activation or deployment. When the mayor, we make a request as the District of Columbia, we make a request, we send that federal government, ultimately Secretary of the Army, got requests. There's a whole approval process that request has to go through in order for National Guard resources to be deployed to the District of Columbia. Unlike governors in other states who are able to activate their National Guard without going through those approval processes and receiving approval from the highest level of the federal government. We just, that just does not have to take place in other states. So real hindrance to us in terms of response and ability to call them up.
Thanks. Thanks for that response. Could you just take a minute to share with us your thoughts on whether having the National Guard under the command of a mayor or even a governor of a neighboring state might help the DC Metropolitan Police coordinating with federal authorities to better protect the city and its citizens, and along with federal installations during assault like we experienced on for the sick?
Yes, I think we certainly should. We know even on that day, on January the 6th, prior to any movement of the National Guard from the assignments that they have been given, the traffic posts, again, that required approval at the highest levels of the federal government, to Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of Defense, in order to just move the National Guard or change of mission in essence. So yes, I think that should certainly be something that falls under the mayor's authority.
All right, thanks so much. A question, if I could, for Mr. Sun. Mr. Sun, in your testimony, you state
Listening
that
to Senator
the events of
Carper of
January
Delaware
6th were not the
interviewing
result of
the
poor
chief
planning
of police
on behalf of the U.S.
for the
Capitol
city
Police,
of Washington,
but
D.C.
rather a lack of actionable intelligence that would have allowed the let me start over. But rather a lack of actionable intelligence that would have allowed the U.S. Capitol Police to properly prepare. As I was looking through Mr. Stinger's testimony, and former Sergeant at Arms for the U.S. Senate, he states, and I want to quote, he says, "The sharing of information and resources is paramount for success." That's his quote. I strongly agree with that statement. Mr. Sun, what went wrong leading up to January 6th with regard to gathering and sharing actionable intelligence? Why do you think the likelihood of a truly devastating attack was so badly underestimated, Mr. Sun?
I think as you start to hear some of the federal agencies on the investigations that are on, they're finding evidence that this was a coordinated attack that had been coordinated among numerous states sometime in advance of this. That's the information that would have been extremely helpful for them to detect some type of level of coordination that would have given us the indication that we're going to see more than just a may become violent, may be inclined to violence type of preparations. You look at it now, you see, knowing what occurred, you see what type of resources were brought to bear around the Capitol. That type of information could have given us efficient advance warning plan for an attack.
The great Paul Newman movie, Cool Hand Luke. That line you probably, a lot of people, certainly in my generation, remember. What we have here is a failure to communicate. That was right at the end of the film. What we have here is a failure to communicate. Do we have a failure to communicate here? And I'm not one who's crazy about like pointing fingers and signing blind, but to whom do we assign that failure to communicate?
I believe that question's for me, sir. What I look at is, we have a process for communication. And being a consumer of intelligence, I look at it more of, I think there's a failure of having a wide enough lens. Look at what are the current threats that we're facing in a nation now from some of the domestic extremists. I think the communications processes are there. They need to be worked on a little bit. But I think the intelligence community needs to broaden its what collects.
We now know in retrospect that the gathering on the rioters on January 6th didn't begin on January 5th or the 4th or the 3rd. It started like weeks before, and was fomented and encouraged, as we now know, by among others, our president. And somehow that all of that work and all the intelligence that was gathered by the FBI and other Homeland Security never found its way to people who right here in DC could have used it to most have avoided the tragedy of January the 6th. Thank you. Our thanks to particularly the officers of the Capitol Police and others who joined them in trying to protect us in this Capitol on that day.
I know we have several members ready to go, and we want you to go as quickly as possible, but there's been a request from our witnesses who have been here a long time. We could give them a 5-minute break and we will reconvene 5 minutes. Question. We will recess for 5 minutes.
So the committee just took a 5-minute break, and it's been pretty amazing. I mean, the people of both. I was astonished to hear Ron Johnson, of all people, the biggest apologist for Trump and I mean, just all Trumpism and all this other kind of stuff. I was just astonished to hear him say, I want to see all these people prosecuted to the maximum extent of the law. Apparently, the memo has changed, and it's pretty astonishing stuff. This is supposed to be a 5-minute break, so presumably on the other side of our break, which is coming up in about 3 minutes, we will be continuing the hearings. We'll see. If it gets into wonky, boring minutia, I'm going to pop back in. I'll pick up your phone calls if you have thoughts specifically on the attacks on the 6th. My op-ed that I published this morning over at thomhartmann.medium.com is all about Republican lies, how the Republican Party needs to be thrown into the dustbin of history because of all the lies they've told us. They lied to us about COVID. My best friend nearly died from it. It's this old joke on the internet. Why is it that America can land a helicopter on Mars but can't keep power on in Texas? Well, because the scientists run the project on Mars and the Republicans run Texas. Reagan lied to us about AIDS. We've seen this before, by the way. There was this Order of the Star-Spangled Banner that took over Massachusetts. They were called the Know Nothing Party. But they lied to us that COVID was like the flu. They lied to us about voter fraud. They lied to us about trickle-down economics. They lied to us that student debt builds character. They lied to us that America has the best healthcare system in the world when tens of thousands of people die every year for lack of healthcare, and we have the worst infant and maternal mortality rates in the world. They lied to us that guns keep us safe when in reality they produced an epidemic of school shootings and suicides. They lied to us that tax cuts for billionaires and big corporations help out the little guy. They lied to us that unions hurt working people. They lied to us about global warming. I mean, it goes on.
To the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So we'll see, how the hearing is going on the other side of this break, and otherwise, we'll be taking your calls as well. Our book for the Thom Hartmann Book Club today is A Nation Forged by Crisis, A New American History by Jay Sexton. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 9. The quest for national security and global power, America's shifting position in the international economy, and fluctuations in immigration have made the United States the nation that it is today. Americans' foreign relations have conditioned its history not only in their cumulative effects over the long haul, but also as a result of their volatility. In periods of crisis, America's position in the world has lurched in unexpected directions. For as inexorable as the rise of the United States appears in retrospect, there have been contingent moments in which the very existence of our nation was up for grabs. This is the essence of crisis. The world turned upside down, the known replaced by the unknown, panic reigning as people struggle to maintain their balance and shifts in the very ground beneath their feet. It came with a speed and ferocity that left men dazed, New York Times correspondent Elliot Bell wrote of Wall Street's catastrophic collapse in October of 1929. Quote, the market seemed like an insensate thing that was wreaking a wild and pitiless revenge upon those who thought to master it, end quote. Crises are contagious, spreading like viruses from one realm to another. It's not without reason that the word crisis was associated with medical conditions and health scares in the 19th century. Each of the periods under consideration in this book were less a singular crisis than a set of interlinked crises. A political crisis could trigger an economic panic, which in turn could intensify social conflict, and so on. As these pandemics spread through the body politic, crisis itself was normalized, becoming an almost accepted characteristic of an age. Just as foreign crises have spread to the United States, domestic ones have spilled across its borders, unsettling foreign countries and peoples, as well as reconfiguring America's connections to the world. Consider the fateful winter of secession that followed the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln. The crisis over slavery that divided the Union into warring sections that led to a series of sharp reversals in America's position in the global system. The foreign capital that had rushed into the roaring American economy in the preceding decades suddenly began to flee. Indeed, more capital left the United States in 1860 to 1862 than came into it. Also a once-in-a-century occurrence. One of the world's most valuable commodities and America's largest export, Southern cotton, was confined to the ports of the Confederacy as a result of Richmond's ill-fated diplomatic strategy, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the British textile town of Lancashire. The most unexpected reversal was how the national security that the United States had attained after the war against Mexico in the 1840s was suddenly imperiled, with European powers encroaching once again upon the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, the Confederate emissaries across the Atlantic were in search of alliance with Britain. Our country, Secretary of State William Seward lamented in early 1861, after having expelled all European powers from the continent, now threatened to relapse into an aggravated form of its colonial experience, and like India, Turkey, China, and Italy, become the theater of transatlantic intervention and rapacity. A wider view of American history that looks beyond the nation's borders brings into focus not only the migration patterns, economic flows, and international rivalries that have connected the United States to the world, but also those rare moments in which the very existence of the nation was in question. Perhaps none was more pregnant with implications than the autumn of 1877, when the fate of the Patriots' bid for independence hung in the balance. Having proclaimed their independence to the world the previous 4th of July, their cause had stalled on the battlefield and in the diplomatic courts of the old world. I think the game is pretty near up, Washington privately confessed at year's end. To accomplish their independence is not quite so easy as to declare it, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham haughtily remarked. But then a series of events forever changed the course of modern history. The stunning Patriot victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October, the drafting of the Articles of Confederation in November that, for all its limitations, further demonstrated the political resolve of the Americans. And most of all, the alliance signed with France in February 1778, which provided the Patriots with the resources, military assistance, and naval power that ultimately tipped the scales in their favor. There are comparable Saratoga moments in other crises in U.S. history, as we shall see. These contingent moments played out in their own distinctive ways, but are joined by a common denominator that has been curiously forgotten in our age of U.S. global power. Foreign states and people have played decisive roles in the critical moments of American history. As we make our way through our own era of global instability, in an unprecedentedly interconnected world, there's perhaps no more important lesson from the past to keep in mind. Crisis may beget crisis, Franklin Roosevelt said, as his administration transitioned from battling the Great Depression to entering the Second World War. But the progress underneath does not wholly halt. It does go forward.
Good to see you on remote.
Like so many of Roosevelt's public statements, this one reveals the truth even as it conceals
Senator
others.
Merkley,
The United States came out on the other side of its greatest crises as a stronger and more efficiently organized nation, as Roosevelt suggested.
Witnesses.
The process of mobilizing resources to counter threats catalyzed innovations in political economy, such as the creation of a national financial system during the Civil War.
Leader of the Proud Boys for destruction of property and possessing high-capacity firearm magazines. And on the following day, on January 5th, the FBI issued a report, Joint Terrorism Task Force, going to the U.S. Capitol Police. And that report noted that on far-right media, the threats included things such as comments such as, "Be ready to fight. Congress needs to hear glass break
the Senate Homeland Security
doors
Committee,
being kicked
chaired
in,
by Gary
blood
Peters of
from their
Michigan, and the
BLM
Senate
and
Rules and
Antifa
Administration Committee,
slave
chaired by
soldiers
Amy
being
Klobuchar
spilled.
of Minnesota. Right now, Senator Jeff Merkley is interrogating the former head of the Capitol Police, Stephen Sund.
We die. Nothing else to achieve this goal. Did you get that FBI intelligence report?
Addressed that right when we started. The United States Capitol Police Department did get that report. I was just advised of that in the last 24 hours. That report made it from the Joint Terrorism Task Force over to our Intelligence Bureau, over to a sergeant there. and ceased moving forward at that. No leadership, self included, over at Capitol Police was aware of that at the time of the event.
So there is, you've referred in your testimony to the individual who is the head, John Donahue, Director of Intelligence on the U.S. Capitol Police. And did he receive that report, but he did not pass that on to you as head of the USCP?
Again, I have no knowledge that he received that report over to a official of the rank of sergeant and didn't move any.
Okay, well, that's very concerning. Were there not procedures for the head of the intelligence on the U.S. Capitol Police get the intelligence report, to review it, especially when there were significant other indications of potential violence, and make sure that you as leader had that developed?
It just got real faint.
Additional plans were needed?
I'm sure that's something that they're looking at in their current after action. Yes, there is a process for it. But again, that's, as I mentioned before, that was raw intelligence that was coming in. And again, taking into consideration at this type of broad insurrectionist type event with thousands of armed coordinated individuals.
I know you're saying that folks are looking at that now, but my question was, did you have a procedure for important intelligence to be brought directly to your attention, and did that system break down? And that's why you did not see warnings about blood being spilled, get violent, be ready to come and die.
Yes, there is a process in place to make sure that critical, important information is brought up to the leadership. Again, that was something that would have gone through the development and the analysis of that information.
Okay, so you're saying the intelligence side of U.S. Capitol Police failed to get that into your hands. Let me turn to rules of engagement. So officers are out perimeter, which you've referred to, and you have those kind of perimeter fence that look like bike rack. And in a normal situation, those tell peaceful protesters this is where you stop. Was there any sort of discussion or training about what to do if protesters started picking those things up and opening holes in that perimeter? What were the rules? If I'm a police officer that day on the line, Capitol, how was I trained, like, what do I, when those perimeter breach? Do I use spray? Do I use a stun gun? Do I use tear gas? Do I have a clear sense exactly how I'm supposed to respond?
There is a rules of engagement. There's a use of force policy, and there's also a civil disobedience unit training that has to do with when you have a non-compliant group, how you deal with non-compliance and gaining compliance, which would include hand control techniques, the application of chemical spray, and then impact.
So on that day, you issued rules of engagement that included what specifically? I'm an officer. What was I supposed to do if those barricades were breached?
There's rules of engagements that exist. They weren't issued just that day. They existed. But
they don't vary from event to event based on threat analysis?
No, sir.
So that perimeter got larger, which meant police officers spread out over larger areas. Once it's breached, what are the directions to the police on the team to be able to retreat to a defensible point?
So what we had what's called a system established. You have an incident command for both the exterior, the resources on the exterior of the building that would provide those officers, those CDU units, with specific directions on where to go, what's the next step, Upper West Terrace, which is what they were told to do, as well as an incident command system inside the building handling the session.
So I'm out on the plaza. The crowd forms past me. I have an assigned place to go to retreat to that is defensible.
The incident commander would be providing direction to field on where to retreat.
So no advanced information. And how do you avoid the situation of those who are guarding a door, closing and locking the door, and leaving police officers stranded outside of that locked perimeter?
So your question, how do you prevent that? Is that what you're saying?
How do you prevent that? If you've got folks who are guarding a door and protesters are trying to get through it, so they're trying to lock that and prevent it, and there isn't a pre-planned how to deal with officers who are stranded outside of those doors. How's that handled? Do you have drills on that? Have set instructions on that?
Again, that's something I would look for the on-site official, the on-site incident commander, to provide those officers with directions where to relocate.
Okay, let me put it this way. Have you ever held a drill to respond to this situation where a crowd pushes past the exterior barricade?
Not this level of situation, no, sir.
To what level have you had such drills?
We've done various exercises with people, activities on the grounds during civil disobedience training, how to handle riotous groups.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn just seconds left to our former Sergeant of Arms for the Senate, Mr. Stenger. At the time that we were in the Senate chamber and the protesters, the rioters, reached the perimeter of the Senate, there was a very quick rush to try to lock doors, and there were people searching for how do you lock these, many entrances on the balcony. Have there ever been any sort of a drill with the Sergeant of Arms team or in partnership with Capitol Police on how to secure the doors to the chamber as a last point of defense?
Yes, sir. They at least once a year they hold a chamber action drill where they would work together with the Capitol Police, the doorkeepers to do a lockdown, so they know how to when they should lock down. And
so that is done as an actual drill where people have to run, get the keys, lock the doors, know what doors they're supposed to guard. Are they supposed to guard them from the inside or from the outside, and so forth?
Yes, sir.
And when was the last such drill of that nature?
I'd have to go back and check. Try and do it once a year.
I think I'm out of time, and I thank you very much to the chairman.
Is Senator Scott recognized?
That was Jeff Merkley. Now Senator Tim Scott of what is it, South Carolina or North Carolina is up.
Your hard work. We have National Guard. You'll tell us how you made to bring Guard you since you're involved. The National Guard presence, not as a result of the riot, Guard is.
So that we developed evening of the 6th. We made the request, we got the Guard in, we started looking at the future, what was going to be, started talking about bringing in the first section of global fencing, basically went right around Capitol Square, which is Constitution Independence first. We got that in place, then we started looking at what necessary National Guard resources working with the National Guard representative. So that was developed with Capitol Police, working with Sergeant Arms in the evening going into 7th. So we developed that.
Were you the only one involved? Sergeant Arms involved?
I believe so. I'd have to go back and pull that information. We were working on a number of different aspects of it at the time, but I had my general counsel as well as our operations working on the request coordination with.
What was the purpose of the original National Guard that came put up? What was the rationale? What was the threat assessment?
So just to make sure I understand, you're talking about the National Guard that came 6th?
No, the presence that stayed after.
Oh, the one that stayed after. So what was the threat assessment?
What was the threat assessment? Why was it set up? They would months on end.
Well, again, beyond the 8th. Again, my departure date was the 8th, so the information I have is up until the 8th. It was based. They were putting them in place based on the mass insurrection that we had on the 6th. I wasn't aware of any additional intelligence at that point about possible violent extremists regrouping, staging another attack.
So you haven't seen anything that would give us a threat assessment now that we have a concern that we need to have the National Guard present. Doesn't mean there's not, but you haven't seen anything.
No, sir. I've been really not in that environment.
Anybody else any of the others that are here to testify? Do you have any threat assessment seeing the reason that we have the National Guard here today? Is that a no from everybody? No one has any idea why we have the National Guard here?
This is Chief Conte. Yeah, my guess is in response to all the things that have happened. But to your question specifically about specific intelligence, I have not personally seen anything that's.
Are you involved in
This
the
is the
decisions
Senate
all
Homeland
of
Security
why the
Committee
National Guard's here?
and the Senate
No,
Rules
sir, I am not.
Administration Committee, chaired by Gary Peters and Amy Klobuchar. We'll continue with the hearings after this.
With regard to why the National Guard?
That has not been shared with. No.
Does that surprise you?
I can't say that I'm really surprised. Quite frankly, we have talked about intelligence in terms of what we expect to see in the city. There are several law enforcement calls that take place between Baltimore Police Department and other federal partners. But again, the Capitol Police and that structure there, something that they're not beholden to the mayor of the District of Columbia or anything like that. So we've changed the information that we have, but again, I just have not seen anything specifically from them that suggests the fence still being the way that it is now. And I should add also, sir, that obviously, I think that there needs to be reimagining of the security posture there. Something certainly should be there, but I'm not exactly sure if the answer to that is razor wire and the deployment that we currently see.
Former Sergeant Arms, you don't have any reason, no one's given you you've not seen any information that would suggest that we have a threat, an imminent threat that we need the National Guard?
I have not.
And I have not either. I resigned on the 7th and have been gone since, so I have no information.
So who would be making the decision that the National Guard needs? Where would the threat assessment come from? What do you know?
I'd maybe look at the current leadership over at maybe the Capitol Police in conjunction with the current Sergeant Arms.
Okay, so it would be the head of Capitol Police and the acting Sergeant Arms.
That is correct. To give you the current information on that.
And would they coordinate with the Metropolitan Police?
Well, if there was intelligence that would indicate the need for such activity, it would usually be shared with our partner, our local law enforcement, would share our perimeter and our borders.
And if there was a threat out there, would that be public? Would there be some public information that they would put out normally?
Again, that all has to do with the nature of the threat, the classification level of the threat. But again, that would be shared with law enforcement within the District of Columbia through the joint JTTF as well as the executive board for the JTTF.
I'm just flabbergasted that not you don't know now, but there's no public information about why we have all these National Guards here. Does that surprise you?
It's a significant security deployment. Again, I believe it's based on the facts of what they've seen. Hindsight being what it is. It's the facts of what occurred on January 6th, unprecedented insurrection.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. You're recognized for your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all of the witnesses for being here today. I especially want to take a moment to acknowledge the heroism of the officers of the U.S. Capitol Police, law enforcement, and other employees of the Capitol who bravely worked to protect our democracy on January 6th, and who have done so much work to restore our Capitol since that day. I also want to thank all of the families of our law enforcement and Capitol Hill staff for what they went through watching this unfold real time. I want to start with a question to Chief Conte, if I could. Chief, Washington, D.C. is obviously no stranger to large assemblies and protests. So what is the standard process for protests in Washington, D.C. when it comes to interagency coordination and information sharing? And following the events of January 6th, what recommendations do you have for improving coordination and information sharing?
Thank you for that question. There are several discussions, meetings that take place between the municipal police department as well as a federal partner. We oftentimes have
Who is
coordination
the
calls
head of the,
national,
or the acting chief of the
Park
DC
Service,
Metro Police,
simply because in a lot
is
of federal
being
lands,
questioned
they
by
authorize
Maggie
the permits
Hassan, who is
for the federal
the
land. So
Democratic
there's
senator from
coordination
New Hampshire.
that
Who
has to
is,
happen there
Mr.
between the
Conti.
Metropolitan Police Department, U.S. Park Police, U.S. Capitol Police, U.S. Secret Service. With respect to the intelligence, again, our partners from the FBI, they're often a part of those discussions. I think that the thing kind of going forward that certainly needs to be looked at with respect to specific intelligence has been outlined throughout some of the testimony today. When there is specific information that warrants us to perhaps posture differently, our notification system needs to be different. The JTTF distribution list that we have is not something that is a monitored list 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that would generate immediate response to that. When those communications are sent out, there are staff members who at some point will get to that information. But I think that, that has been laid out, when we're talking about something of this magnitude that could potentially happen and ultimately did happen in our city, it should posture us to move differently, perhaps with convening phone calls, immediately, not, counting on an email or something, making it through the chain to the levels that it needs to make, for other decisions to be made.
Well, thank you for that answer. One of the things I would observe is sometimes ahead of events like just scheduling ongoing check with leadership at all of the agencies that need to coordinate can have the effect of sharing information real. I want to move to a question, Mr. Stanger, Mr. Irving, and Mr. Sund. The Secretary of Homeland Security has the authority to designate events with national and international significance as national special security events, but that didn't happen for January 6th, even given the threat information readily available ahead of time. Designated events are eligible for expanded federal support related to security of the event. So prior to January 6th, did anyone from the Department of Homeland Security contact you about a potential national special security event designation? And we'll start with you, Mr. Sund, and then the other.
Thank you. No, I'm not aware of anybody from DHS reaching out and requesting, they want to follow up. This want to be a national special security event, or if we were going to request that to be, or if they were going to identify and designate what they call a SEER, a special event rating, to the event.
Thank you. Mr. Stenger and Mr. Irving.
No one contacted.
Thank you.
And the same, me, Senator, no contact with me or my office.
Well, thank you for those answers. I look forward to following up with Department of Homeland Security about this during the next hearing on this topic. Mr. Sund, my last question. The officers of the Capitol Police work each and every day to keep the U.S. Capitol safe and secure. We are all grateful for the brave work of the U.S. Capitol Police officers on January 6th. Tragically, the law enforcement community has now lost 2 officers to suicide since January 6th as a result of the insurrection and the events then. My thoughts, and I'm sure the thoughts of all of us here today, are with the families of MPD Officer Jeffrey Smith and U.S. Capitol Police Officer Howard Liebengood. Mr. Sund, what mental health resources are currently available to United States Capitol Police officers? Are these resources sufficient?
The department has brought in significant mental health. I certainly do appreciate your recognition of that. I've talked to a number of officers who have definitely gone through the battle and feel that feeling a lot of trauma from it. But I know the chief of police, the acting chief, has brought in significant resources. We had the employee assistance program. They brought in a number of outside contractors that have gotten very good response. So I think there's a lot of mental health resources available. I know a number of officers are taking advantage of it, which I'm happy.
Well, so am I, and I would encourage all officers who feel that they could benefit from counseling to reach out for it. And I would certainly encourage, and I'm sure my colleagues here would too, that all leadership in law enforcement reach out to us if they feel the resources are strained or need bolstering in some way. Thank you all for your service. Thank you very much for your testimony and for being here today. To the chair and ranking members of our respective committees, thank you so much for organizing this hearing.
Thank you, Senator Hess. And Chair now recognizes Senator Hawley for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by saying a special thank you and a special acknowledgement to Captain Mendoza, who shared her testimony earlier this morning. Captain Mendoza is a native of Missouri and an alumna of Park University, if memory serves. And I just want to say to her, I want to thank her for being here today, but also for her incredible bravery and courage on January 6th. And on behalf of the entire state of Missouri, I want to say thank you for what you have done. Thank you for what you represent. And I also want to take that opportunity to say again now, as I said on the night of that terrible day, a thank you to all of the law enforcement from all of our various branches who responded in this dire emergency to face these criminal rioters, these violent criminals, to repulse them from the Capitol and to secure this space so that the work of Congress could continue. So thank you, and a special thanks to Captain Mendoza from the state of Missouri. Mr. Sund, if I could just return to the question about the National Guard activation. I'm a little bit confused about the timeline here, and I want to ask you, Mr. Irving, some questions just so I can get this clear in my own head. I'm looking at your written testimony. You testified that you spoke with Mr. Irving at 1:09, actually both of the sergeants at arms at 1:09 p.m. Now, I understand there's a little bit of dispute about the timeline here, but you do say that Mr. Irving advised you that he needed to run it, namely the request for the National Guard, he needed to run it up the chain of command. Have I got that right?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, Mr. Irving, could I just ask you, when Mr. Sund says that you told him you needed to run it up the chain of command, to whom were you referring there?
Moscow, Ron
Senator
Johnson of
I
Wisconsin
do not
has
recall.
read a statement suggesting that it was Antifa and provocateurs who attacked the Capitol. Senator Hawley, the senator from QAnon, is speaking right now. It's getting interesting. This is the hearings into what happened on January 6th. We'll continue.
I had everyone with me.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We would have approved it immediately. So I have no recollection of that call, and neither do I have a record of it.
You say, I think, that you spoke with Mr. Sund later at approximately 1:30. Is that right?
That is correct, after I left the floor. And on that call, he had indicated to me that conditions were deteriorating and that he might be making a request at a later time.
Okay, and did you then say that you needed to run it up the chain of command, or words to that effect?
No, not to my recollection. I notified leadership, and I went to Michael Stanger's office to receive updates from Mr. Sund as to conditions outside and to determine whether he needed to make a request or not. And when the request was made, shortly after 2, we approved it.
And when you say we, who's we? We approved it.
I was in Michael Stanger's office, so next to Mr. Stanger.
And so you did not consult congressional leadership. You weren't waiting at any point for input from congressional leadership. Is that your testimony, Mr. Irving? Have I got that right?
Yes, I advised them, as we would do with many security protocols.
But you weren't waiting for them at any point. There was no delay, you're saying, in getting National Guard requests, because you didn't at any point actually wait for the input of the Speaker or the Majority Leader or anybody else.
No, absolutely not.
Mr. Sund, is that your recollection?
My recollection was at 1:09, while I was sitting in the command center watching things rapidly deteriorate, I made a phone call. The phone call was made in the presence of, I believe, both my assistant chiefs and possibly my general counsel, at which time I made the initial request that we need to activate the National Guard. The situation's bad on the West Front. I followed up at 1:22 to check on the status of the request.
Okay. One of the things I'm trying to get clear on here is who would constitute the chain of command. Now, it sounds like Mr. Irving is saying that he actually never made that statement and he didn't consult anybody else. I mean, my understanding is from the statute, 2 U.S.C. Chapter 29, Section 1970, that in an emergency situation, I would think that this would qualify, that the Capitol Police Board does not have to consult with members of the Senate or House leadership in order to make a request for deployment of the National Guard or a request of other executive departments and executive agencies. So it would seem strange to me that there was any talk about a chain of command that would involve anybody other than the Capitol Police Board, given the statute. But there seems to be some confusion about the basic facts and who asked for what when. Let me just ask you this, Mr. Sund. On Monday, January the 4th, you've testified that you approached House and Senate Sergeant at Arms to request the assistance of the National Guard, and Mr. Irving stated that he was concerned about the optics of having the Guard deployed. Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
That is correct, sir. On the 4th, it actually wasn't a phone call. It was an in-person visit over to his office where I went in and requested the National Guard.
And Mr. Irving, could you just clarify when you use the term optics, and maybe your recollection is you didn't, so maybe you could speak to that. Did you talk about being concerned about the optics of the National Guard? And then could you just elaborate on what you meant by that? Again, this is Monday, January the 4th now.
Yeah, on Monday, January the 4th, Senator, safety was always the deciding factor in making security plans. And the issue on the table was whether the intelligence warranted troops at the Capitol. And the conversation with Mr. Sund was not, I did not take it as a request. He was merely informing me that he had received an offer from the National Guard. And then when we included Mr. Stanger, the three of us discussed the specific issue as to whether the intelligence warranted the troops. And the answer was no. It was a collective answer, no. And then Mr. Stanger put forth his recommendation to have them on standby. And my recollection was Mr. Sund was very satisfied with that. In fact, he briefed the following day that he was satisfied, and I heard no concern anytime thereafter.
Were you concerned, this use of the word optics, the appearance, what it would look like to have the Guard, this is what Mr. Sund has testified was a concern on January 4th, that there was a reluctance to request assistance because of the appearance. Was there something that you were, what's the appearance that you were concerned about, Mr. Irving, if indeed you were? Were you concerned that having the Guard present would look like it was too militarized? Were you concerned about the criticism of the Guard being deployed in Washington during rioting earlier this summer, the summer of 2020? Would just give us some insight into your thinking there as you recall it.
Senator, I was not concerned about appearance whatsoever. It was all about safety and security. Any reference would have been related to appropriate use of force, display of force, and ultimately the question on the table when we look to any security asset is, does the intelligence warrant it? Is the security plan matched with the intelligence? And again, the collective answer was yes.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask one final question?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Speaker Pelosi has asked retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore to lead an immediate review of Capitol security in light of the attack. The general has said that the leadership of the Capitol Police, that'd be you, Mr. Sund, and both of you, gentlemen, the House and Senate Sergeants at Arms, he's criticized you for, and I'm quoting now, the appearance of complicity during the attack, and also said that you were potentially undertook complicit actions. Those are his words during the attack. Mr. Sund, were you complicit in this attack on January 6th?
Absolutely not, sir. I've heard those comments as well, and I think it's disrespectful to myself and to the members of the Capitol Police Department.
Mr. Stinger, were you complicit in the attacks on January 6th? Mr. Stinger? Were you complicit in the attacks on January 6th?
He's asking you. Sir?
Mr. Irving, were you complicit in the attacks on January 6th?
Absolutely not, Senator.
Yeah, of course none of you were. There's absolutely no evidence to that effect. And Mr. Sund, I think your comments are appropriately taken to allege that any of you, were complicit in this violent mob attack on this building, I think is not only extremely disrespectful, it's really quite shocking. And this person has no business leading any security review related to the events of January 6th. Thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Next, a new member of both committees, Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been a lot of questions. I've been popping in and out from multiple committees.
Previously occupied by Kamala Harris.
A lot of questions already about intelligence, what was known, what was assessed, what was shared, et cetera, and differing opinions. I'll try not to be too repetitive. First, a quick question for Chief Sund and the two Sergeant-at-Arms. I imagine, like most people, you saw most, if not all, of the House impeachment managers' presentations before the United States Senate as they sort of laid out the case, set the impeachment question aside. We know how that was resolved, but in terms of how January 6th didn't just happen, but the lead up to January 6th, is there anything from that presentation that you would disagree with?
So to just make sure I understand, the video I watched and all the information, the video that was portrayed is all accurate video. As far as any of the other commentary associated with the video, I can't say I watched every single bit of it.
The security failures
but I can tell you
on the
video,
attack on the Capitol January 6th.
From the United
Stephen
States Capitol
Sund,
Police,
who
and it
was the head of the Capitol Police, he's now resigned, and Robert Conte, who is the acting head of the D.C. Police Department, the D.C. Metro Police Department, are the principal witnesses. The audio tends to pop around because we got people coming in by Skype and other things, and sometimes it's clipping, but generally speaking, I think we can figure out what's going on here. And this questioning that's going on right now is being conducted by Alex Padilla, the new senator from California who replaced Kamala Harris. And so I'll just turn it over here to Senator Padilla. He will be either speaking with Stephen Sund or Robert Conte.
Okay. Question for Chief Sund specifically. Now, there is an intelligence division within the department, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And now, having read your letter to
Okay, I think we just lost our audio. I'm not sure. Oh, C-SPAN just croaked. Okay, we're gonna restart that and see what's going on with why we lost our audio and why we lost our video. Hopefully, it'll be right back up. But right now, Alex Padilla, who is the senator from California, has been questioning Robert Conte, the acting director of the D.C. Metro Police, and Stephen Sund, the former head of the Capitol Police. Josh Hawley was the last questioner, the Republican from QAnon, and he basically got all of them to say that they had no complicity in this. Like, okay, this is nobody's fault, right? I mean, I don't know where he thought he was going with this, but it's all very strange. And so as soon as we get the signal back, I'll be picking up that signal. But right now, Timothy in Garden City, New York. Hey, Timothy, what's on your mind today? Thanks for calling in.
Hey, thanks, Tom. I just want to say that I live in Macomb County in Sterling Heights. And, just because, what's going on in the Senate hearings about the insurrection. And here, where I live, there are people driving around with Confederate flags on their truck.
Hang on just a second, Timothy. Isn't Macomb County, Sterling Heights, Michigan?
That's correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. When I said Garden City, New York, that must be where your cell phone is from. I'm sorry. You're in Sterling Heights, Michigan.
From living in New York years ago. Yes, so that is correct.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
But for me, the most upsetting thing was the other day I went to a stoplight and there was a big truck
to gain
with a Trump
counterintelligence
flag,
on how
flag,
you and
the
your
license plate
partner
said reload.
agencies would be planning
Vanity plate
and
said
preparing.
Reload. So I live in a place where you really can't express your beliefs because of fear, and it's the whole thing about fear, right?
Oh yeah, these are bullies. Between members of the Small Penis Gun Club, and I mean, we've got massive compensation going on here. Plus, these people who believe the lies that they have been consistently fed for years and years by right-wing hate media, and the Republican Party. I mean, this is go ahead, Timothy.
And Tom, I drive around and there's still like Trump signs all over the neighborhood where I live. It's really upsetting. It really makes me afraid. I'm afraid to walk on the street. I really am. And I really could never express my views publicly.
You're not wearing a Biden sticker on the back of your shirt or something.
No, I would never do that. No, I know that my car would get bashed in or somebody would do something horrible. I wouldn't put it on my lawn because I know that there would be retribution. So, but my point is, when I saw that license plate, how does Michigan State allow somebody to have a reload vanity plate on their truck? That blows my mind to me.
Well, since the Heller decision, guns are just like a normal part of American life. It's why we have the highest rate of guns murders in the world. It's in the developed world. It's why they had the highest rate of gun suicides in the developed world. It's why we have the highest rate of accidental child deaths from guns in the developed world. It's why we have more guns than we have people in this country. So, that's what's going on, Timothy. I think we can get back to the hearings now. So if you want to just make your last point real quick so that I can jump back to the hearings. Okay.
Hey, thanks, Tom.
Okay, thanks a lot, Timothy. Great to hear from you. Here's the hearings. This is back to Senator Alex Padilla of California.
Some 250 individuals who were involved in the Capitol insurrection of January 6th have been arrested. More will likely be arrested in the coming weeks and months, but only a small number, about 52 of these individuals were arrested on January 6th. By contrast, during the largely peaceful protests of last summer, 427 people were arrested. On June 1st alone, 289 people were arrested. Similarly, some 300 protesters were arrested during the Kavanaugh hearings in 2018. So, question, Mr. Sun, can you tell us exactly how the Capitol Police preparations for January 6th differed from preparations for the protests from last summer? And if you can specifically address if they were the same or different use of force guidelines in place on January 6th compared to the protests of last summer, or any criteria for making arrests on January 6th versus the protests from last summer.
Okay, and if you could do that in about a minute.
Yes, ma'am. I will.
Thank you, Senator.
I will do that very concisely.
Okay.
So I want to look at it from planning and preparations. We plan for every demonstration the exact same way. Doesn't matter the message of the person. Doesn't matter.
This is Stephen Sun, the former chief of the Capitol Police.
We do it the exact same way. We develop our information, we develop our intel, and we base a response plan on that. So let's transition to preparations. I will tell you, we handled 15 major demonstrations involving Black Lives Matters groups, following the death of George Floyd over the summer. We had a total of 6 arrests, no use of less lethal capabilities, no use of lethal force capabilities. The events, everything that we put into place for January 6th far exceeded any planning that we did for any events in 2020, with the full activation of the department, the size of the perimeter that we expanded, the deployment of additional protective equipment, the deployment of less lethal and the application of less lethal, with far exceeded any other event that I can recollect on the nation's capital. So I'll just leave it at that. We prepared much more.
Thank you. We're going to go, and thank you, Senator Padilla. We're going to go to Senator Haggerty and then to Senator King, who's been very patient and been on with us online quite a while. Senator Haggerty.
Thank you, Chairman Klobuchar. Thank you very much for having us here today and for holding this hearing. I want to begin by thanking all of the law enforcement.
This is Senator Bill Haggerty.
Today. You and your families, thank you for your sacrifice, and certainly my heart goes out to those and loved ones who lost their lives in this. In the spring of summer of 2020, many people criticized the use of the National Guard to help restore order in Washington following some of the worst rioting in decades. Mayor Bowser said that the Guard presence was, and I quote, unnecessary and maybe counterproductive. And a DC National Guard leader even had to tell his troops, I quote again, Some of the DC public does not agree with our mission and may have nefarious intention toward our service members. And according to a January 5th Washington Post report, top Pentagon officials emphasized that on January 6th, the Guard would have a, quote, far more muted presence than in June, saying that, quote, we've learned our lessons and will be absolutely nowhere near the Capitol building. Mr. Sund has stated that despite attempting to attend National Guard support on Capitol Hill on January 6th,
We're listening to the hearings from the Joint Oversight hearing on the security failures of the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. The Homeland Security Committee and the Senate Rules and Administration Committee meeting together. And we'll be back with this in just a few moments. It's 15 minutes past the hour. History is being made.
January 6th applies Guard troops to protect the Capitol.
Sir, I cannot really testify to what the inner working was or working decisions over at the Pentagon regarding either the decisions from over the summer or the memo that was put out by the Secretary of the Army on the 4th. However, I was very surprised at the amount of time and the pushback I was receiving when I was making an urgent request for their assistance.
That's regrettable. I'd also like to follow up on a line of questioning that Senator Hawley brought up. Speaker Pelosi has indicated that she intends to establish a commission to examine the events of January 6th. Of course, that's why we're here today, examining those issues. Speaker Pelosi has also appointed a retired Army Lieutenant General, Russ Honore, who is going to lead the investigation of what happened. But days after the attack, General Honore said, I think once all this gets uncovered, again, I'm quoting him, it was complicit actions by Capitol Police. Before he added that you, Mr. Sund, were, quote, complicit along with the Sergeant at Arms in the House and Senate. My question is, do any of you believe that comments like these by Mr. Honore suggest that he is someone who is well suited to conduct a serious and unbiased review of the events of January 6th? If so, please explain.
I'll go ahead and start with that response. As I mentioned before, I found the comments that he made regarding myself and also the Capitol Police officers highly disrespectful to the hardworking women and men of that police department, and also to myself. I welcome and I look forward to an after action that will move this agency forward, move our partnership with the federal agencies forward, but it has to be done in an unbiased fashion.
I couldn't agree more, Mr. Sund. Any other responses?
I would disagree with the General's what he said. I don't believe that's true. There's a lot of people that put themselves in very much danger on that day, and I think saying something like that is just not in good taste.
Yeah, I can't imagine that being said myself, implying that you all were complicit in this. But I thank you for your answers, for your service. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Haggerty. Next, Senator King. You may be muted, Senator King.
Oh, I got it.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank the witnesses first for their patience this morning and their thoroughgoing answers. This has been a long hearing, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the fact that although you all are no longer, other than the chief in Washington, no longer in your positions, you've come forward to give us the benefit of your observations. It seems to me one of the clear, and I'm not going to plow this ground again, but one of the clear pieces of information we've learned today is an intelligence failure. Not necessarily a failure of intelligence, but a failure to communicate intelligence. And I think that's something that we all need to think about, and you can be very helpful to us in suggesting what should be the chain of communication in terms of intelligence. You can't adequately prepare if you don't have the information, and it clearly seems to me there were some failures. Chief Sund, I have a specific question for you, and it's more forward-looking, but I'd appreciate your insights. The question is, how do we protect the Capitol from either an angry mob or, probably more likely, one or two or three malignant actors without turning it into a fortress? How do we allow the American people to go in the rotunda, to tour the Capitol, to picnic on the grounds, to play with their kids? That it seems to me that going forward, that's really one of the challenges. We want security, but we don't. I would hate to see the U.S. Capitol turned into a fortress. Your thoughts, Mr. Sund?
I think you need your mic on there.
Caucuses with the Democrats just asked the question of Stephen Sund,
Thank
the
you
former
very much.
Capitol Police
I'll
chief,
go back to your original comment
about how do
with the
we
intelligence
allow
and the
average Americans to visit the
think now-
Capitol? How do we do this without turning the Capitol into a fortress? Here it is.
Especially high-level credible intelligence to quickly get to where it needs to be. I think my big concern is, on the collection, on how wide we're casting the net to collect our intelligence that would have revealed this was coming, and we are facing this type of mass insurrection. I definitely want to say the Capitol Police is well-versed, well-trained on handling what you're talking about, a Mumbai-style attack. A couple of, attackers armed, active shooter events, things like that. Those are the type of events that we are ready for. It is the thousands of people that are storming the Capitol that creates a big issue with us. So when you talk about, physical security, and I'd mentioned it in my opening statement and one of the initial questions, I think there are options for maintaining an open environment, an open campus type of environment, while putting some substantial physical security measures in place, both for the building, the skin of the building, as well as farther out. Time and distance is our best friend, and the most important thing is to provide some kind of protection farther out, so the officers have more more time to deal with it. But that's something that I think should be discussed in a closed or classified session.
I understand, but and I hope that is a discussion, Madam Chair, that we can have. I think that's a very important because we just, as I say, we don't want the United States Capitol to be so protected that it's inaccessible to the American people. Amplify on your intelligence. It seems to intelligence answer. It seems to me you're saying it's communicated adequately, but we didn't have the collection that we needed. For example, the Norfolk, Virginia letter. Is it how does it get filtered, and where does it get filtered?
Again, the Norfolk Field Office letter. That's something to consider, because even on the 5th at noon on the 5th, I held a joint conference call with the members of the board, my executive team, a dozen of the top law enforcement and military officials from Washington, D.C., where we discussed the upcoming events on the 6th, the upcoming events for the inauguration, any kind of threats, any kind of issues we may have. And even though we had the director of the field office, for the Washington field office of the FBI, nothing was mentioned about it. So I think my big point is, I think we need to look out. There's significant evidence coming out that the insurrection that occurred on the 6th was planned, coordinated well in advance, coordinated almost to the point where you're looking between a number of states where you're having events coordinated. And it's that detection that I think would have been key to putting the effective security in place for this event.
Finally, when we're talking about providing this level of security, is there a playbook? Is there a contingency plan that's literally sitting on a shelf somewhere that says demonstrations around the Capitol, here's what you do? I mean, some of the timing things, for example, the deployment of the National Guard might have been faster had there been a predetermined set of phone numbers, actions, steps to be taken. Does that exist? And if not, should it exist?
To the level where you're including the National Guard, there is a process where we handle special events and demonstrations, but I tend to agree that we need to streamline the process that we request the National Guard in the future.
And yeah, because clearly there was a delay there that was an important part of the response at the time. Madam Chair, I want to thank these witnesses. I think they've really made a contribution. And they made a contribution when they were serving in their respective positions. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sinema is recognized for her questions.
Oh, thank you,
And
Mr.
Cinema
Chairman.
Democrat from
My
Arizona.
first question is for Chief Conti. What coordinating actions were taken in the weeks leading up to January 6th to share intel across federal and local law enforcement? And what security planning took place and with which agencies?
Thank you for that question. So there were a series of several meetings that took place leading up to the events of January the 6th. There are the weekly law enforcement partners calls that take place where our federal partners are part of that. There's the First Amendment coordinating calls that took place, at least two of those prior to this event. There's a National Park Service permit call that also took place prior to this event. And as Chief Sun mentioned, several calls involving several of the law enforcement entities leading up to the events of January the 6th. So there are a significant amount of phone calls or virtual meetings that took place leading up to January the 6th.
Thank you. And could you talk a little bit about what you see as the mistakes that were made or the holes that didn't help connect all those dots in those meetings and coordinating prior to January 6th?
So I think the major issue, at least from my perspective, I think that in terms of the sharing of information, how shared, I think that is where the focus should be. Again, we're talking about a report that came from the Norfolk office on the day before that night. It's around after 7:00 p.m. That was sent to email boxes. You know, as the chief of police for the Metropolitan Police Department, I assure you that my phone is on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I'm available for any phone call from any agency that has information with respect to something of this magnitude happening in our city. Certainly, if there was information about one of our police stations being overrun or a federal building being overrun that was relayed to the Metropolitan Police Department, I assure you that I would be on the phone directly with the officials that are responsible for the law enforcement response to give them that information
Ron Johnson, the senator from Moscow, has said that it was a festive atmosphere and that it was Antifa and provocateurs that stormed the Capitol. Very strange. We'll continue in just a moment.
Listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Oh, and the Republicans are all over trashing General Honore as well. It's the joint oversight hearing on security failures
My
on
next
January
question
6th.
is for Mr. Sun. So you outlined that the FBI report was sent via email to the Capitol Police the evening of January 5th, and that you never received the report. Is there an understanding within the system of how that report did not make it to you or to other individuals in leadership in the Capitol Police the night of January the 5th?
I appreciate that question, ma'am. Actually, as I mentioned earlier in the discussion, this is a report that I am just learning about within the last, they informed me yesterday of the report. So I'm not sure of what investigation may be going on. I've since January 8th have left the department. What investigations? I know the chief has put additional safeguards in place to make sure something like that doesn't happen again, but I'm not sure of what the outcome of was, why that didn't get pushed up farther.
Was there an expectation or a process or procedure prior to January 6th that should have gotten that memo up to your attention the night of January 5th?
There's a process that ensures that information from the Joint Terrorism Task Force and through our task force officers gets over to their intelligence division and would be moved up to our intelligence analyst and the director of that intelligence division. And then based on that information, he could push it then up to the assistant chief or directly to me. He has my cell phone number. We talk regularly.
And so as you mentioned, you were just learning about this recently, but would it have been an expectation that the FBI would have called Capitol Police or someone on the Joint Task Force to alert the new intelligence in an expedited fashion, knowing that this information made it to the Capitol Police intel team on the 5th? What I'm trying to understand is how it did not get to the higher levels to make preparations the night of the 5th.
Right. I'll just go ahead and echo what Chief Conti had mentioned, that I do think that deserves additional focus. I think if we have information that's coming in the day before a major event that has that level of specificity, that it could get a little more attention than just being handled either through an email or electronic format.
Was there any intelligence that you did receive in the several days leading up to January 6th that caused you to change any of the security plans amongst the United States Capitol Police?
So yeah, just to reiterate, all the intelligence and all the information that we've been receiving during the development of this, the event for the 6th, outlined very similar to what the intelligence report that was published on the 3rd outlined. We were expecting large number of protesters coming in. We expected a potentially violent group. We knew they were being focused on the Capitol, and we knew that some of them had maybe armed. And that is what was really driving up until even, regardless of what was put out the 3rd, this was information that we knew. We were developing our security plan around that. And that's when we looked at, based on our review of the November and December mega events, determined we were going to adjust our fence line and push our fence line out. And when we wanted to do that, that's when I requested the National Guard, knowing we're going to need support for the fence line.
Thank you. Chief Conti, you stated that the intelligence that you had received on January 6th didn't differ from the previous MAGA marches, the 2 previous. Was there any conversation or consideration about the fact that the January 6th was scheduled on a very important day, that Congress would be in session certifying the results of the election? And was that different in a consideration around security than the other 2 marches, which had been on weekends without Congress being in session?
Absolutely, and that's reflected in the response posture for the Metropolitan Police Department. For the 2 prior demonstrations that happened, the MAGA 1 and 2 marches, the Metropolitan Police Department, we did not call up officers from surrounding jurisdictions to be stationed physically within the footprint of the District of Columbia. We did not do that before. The mayor, in addition to calling up those additional resources, again, called up the National Guard specifically for the reasons that we outlined to them, which would allow the Metropolitan Police Department to be a lot nimble in our response. That, in essence, enabled us to be able to respond quickly to assist the Capitol Police officers. So those responses were different. We were disrupting individuals or intercepting individuals who were armed with firearms in our city in violation of the mayor's order, many of whom that were on federal grounds. So the Metropolitan Police Department's posture certainly was escalated beyond what we did the prior 2 marches.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your indulgence. I see I've gone over my time. I have a few extra questions that I'll submit. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Senator Sinema, and thank you for your emphasis on the FBI report and the issues that everyone here seems to acknowledge with getting that it didn't go at the right place, and just putting send isn't enough for a report like that. Okay, next we have Senator Cruz, and then after that will be Senator Ossoff. And if there's any other senators who wish to ask questions, who haven't asked questions, you should tell us, because those are the last 2 we have. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So here's Senator
Let me
Cruz,
say to each of the witnesses here today, thank you for
the senator from Cancun.
testimony, and thank you also for your service. I want to thank each of you and also each of the heroic law enforcement officers who demonstrated extraordinary courage in fighting to repel the terrorist attack that unfolded on the Capitol on January 6th. And we are grateful for the bravery and the courage in the face of a truly horrific attack. In the aftermath of that attack, there is naturally a process to assess what could have been done to better prevent that attack, to better secure the Capitol. And I think everyone recognizes that hindsight is different from a decision made in the moment facing the threat immediately, but this hearing is nonetheless productive for analyzing the security decisions and law enforcement decisions that were made real time, and for learning from them what can be done differently to ensure that an attack like that never again occurs. Chief Sund, I want to focus on, with some detail, your written testimony and just walk through what occurred in the days preceding January 6th and then on January 6th. So in your written testimony, you say, on Monday, January 4th, I approached the 2 Sergeant-at-Arms to request the assistance of the National Guard, as you had no authority to do so. You go on to say, I first spoke with the House Sergeant-at-Arms to request the National Guard. Mr. Irving stated that he was concerned about the, quote, optics of having National Guard present and didn't feel the intelligence supported it. He referred me to the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms to get his thoughts on the request. I then spoke to Mr. Stenger and again requested the National Guard. Instead of approving the use of the National Guard, however, Mr. Stenger suggested I ask then how quickly we could get support if needed and to lean forward in case we had to request assistance on January 6th. Can you describe at a little more length those conversations with the 2 Sergeant-at-Arms on January 4th?
Absolutely, sir. The first conversation occurred Monday morning. I went over, I'd have to refer notes, but sometime maybe around 11 o'clock in the morning, I met with Mr. Irving in his office. That's where I made the first request for the National Guard. He had indicated, I don't know if I really like the optics. I don't think the intelligence really supports it. He had, like we had said, recommended I talk to the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms. I went over and met with, later on the day, either, I'm trying to recall if it was in person or over the phone. I'd have to go back to my timeline, where I reached out to him, and they may have already talked, because he had referred me. He said, do you know somebody over at the D.C. National Guard? I said, yes, I do. I have a good friend over there, General William Walker. He said, can you give him a call and see if we needed assistance, how quickly could we get assistance and what type of assistance could he give us? So that evening, as I was driving home at about 6:35 at night, I went ahead and called General Walker and spoke to him and said, hey, General Walker, I don't have authority to request National Guard, but I want to find out if we needed them on Wednesday. How quickly could you get them for us, and is there a way you can kind of be prepared just in case we put in the request? At that point, he had advised me that he has 125 National Guardsmen who are supporting the COVID response in the District of Columbia. And if we needed a response, a quick response, he could, what he called, repurpose them and get them to the armory, at which point we could get somebody over to swear them in and try and get them to us as quick as possible. We ended our call. The next day, I met with I met with Mr. Stenger. He came over to the office for the 12 o'clock video call that I had hosted with the dozen of the law enforcement officials from the National Capital from D.C. We spoke about it briefly there and told him what William Walker had told me, as well as I'd passed on to Mr. Irving, I think later on that afternoon. They both seemed satisfied with that response.
So, Mr. Irving and Mr. Stenger, Mr. Irving, as I understand it, you have some disagreement with the characterization about the concern about the optics. So I would invite both Mr. Irving and Mr. Stenger to relay your best recollection of that conversation on January 4th.
Senator, my best recollection of the conversation on January 4th was a phone call from Chief Sund indicating that he had received an offer for 125 unarmed guard that could be positioned around traffic perimeter checkpoints at the Capitol. My recollection again is, as we followed up with Mr. Stenger, the three of us engaged in a conversation whereby we looked at the offer in light of the existing intelligence. And the decision, the collective decision amongst the three of us, was that the intelligence did not warrant the National Guard. And my recollection, that ended the discussion relative to the offer. And the only question on the table is, should we perform any follow-up? And Mr. Stenger recommended that we ask that they be placed on standby. And that was the end of the discussion.
So to the best of your recollection, did you make the comment about optics? And if so, what did you mean by that?
I cannot remember my exact verbiage. Had I used any language to the effect, it was all in reference to whether the intelligence was matched to the security plan.
And let me ask both Mr. Irving and Mr. Stenger, did you all have conversations with congressional leadership, either Democratic or Republican leadership, on this question of supplementing law enforcement presence, bringing in National Guard, either on January 4th or real time in January 6th?
On January 4th, no, I had no follow-up conversations. And it was not until the 6th that I alerted leadership that we might be making a request. And that was the end of the discussion.
Mr. Stenger?
For myself, it was January 6th that I mentioned it to Leader McConnell's staff.
So there's been some disagreement about what time phone calls occurred. I know Senator Portman asked earlier. Presumably everyone has phone records. I think it would be helpful if each of you could forward the relevant phone records to this committee. And Chief Sund, you also reference in your testimony that you sent an email to congressional leadership.
I have it.
If you could forward that to the committee as well, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our panel. Just want to take a moment and echo the sentiments of so many of my colleagues expressing appreciation for the men and women of the United States Capitol Police who endured a great deal on January 6th and showed great heroism. And also, Madam Chair, if I might express an interest in working with you to ensure that they're well taken care of and their needs are met. This discussion of the conversation that the three of you had regarding supplementary security support on January 6th raises the question of who's in charge. Is consensus between the two sergeants at arms and the chief of the U.S. Capitol Police required to make such a request? Mr. Sund?
The request for the National Guard needs to go to the Capitol Police Board for approval, yes.
Who has ultimate responsibility for the security of the U.S. Capitol complex? Which individual?
I believe that falls under the Capitol Police Board.
The Capitol Police Board. So there is no individual who has personal responsibility for the security of the U.S. Capitol complex?
That's the way I interpret it, yes.
Had the U.S. Capitol Police conducted exercises simulating comparable events such as a violent riot on or within the U.S. Capitol complex?
Part of our training for civil disobedience units involves dealing with riotous groups. So we do that training. We do training on people attempting to gain entry into the building. Officers are trained on how to handle if someone tries to come through your door unauthorized. But training for thousands of armed insurrectionists that were coordinated and well equipped. No, we have not had that training before January 6th, but I'm sure we'll find a way to. I'm sure they'll find a way to do it now.
So, if I understand correctly, Mr. Sund, you're saying that personnel had engaged in tactical training regarding techniques to repel attempts to breach the complex, regarding rules of engagement, but had any comprehensive exercises that included command, that included procedures for coordination with supporting agencies, that included requests for support, that included communications with the Department of Defense or White House officials or Guard units been conducted?
Yes, we have. We do exercises that are very similar to what you're talking about before some of our national special security events. Those are the NSSEs, such as the inauguration. We'll do tabletop exercises that go through the process of what you're talking about. Yes.
Thank you. And had the Capitol Police held any such exercises not pertaining to specific national security special events? So in order to deal with emergent contingencies like a riot, not associated with one of those moments specifically identified as requiring a whole of government security response?
Yeah, one of the most important aspects of that you're talking about that we train our individuals to is what we call the incident command system. That's one of the systems that we feel really under the unprecedented pressure that they exhibited on January 6th begin to break down. The incident command system is established specifically so you have people that have the clearest understanding of what's happening either in the field or inside the building, in control of the resources to utilize to defend against whatever issue you're having or respond to whatever incident you have. It's really an all hazards approach, but that is something that's trained. We have it as part of our general orders. That is something that we'll need to look back on to see how it broke under this pressure.
And I asked this question in part because of the account that's been shared regarding the coordination with the Guard unit, which was here for COVID-related mission. And if I recall correctly, you related that you had a conversation with the commanding officer and discussed mobilizing that unit if necessary, first via an intermediary stop at a Marine Corps facility to then come to the Capitol if necessary on January 6th. Were there not pre-existing channels of communication and procedures in the event you, not at a moment such as inauguration or a State of the Union, but on any given day needed a quick reaction force to provide security support?
Well, I think when you refer to it, I think it's the established process where if you're going to request them in advance or request them for an incident, I think what we need to look at is those emergency requests. But there is a process for going through the Secretary of the Army, placing an official request. Ultimately, we did that. We had to do a letterhead after the fact. We did the oral request first and set it up that way. But I think what I did by reaching out to General Walker was to get an idea, much like as I was requested to do, if we requested them on the 6th, what kind of resources could they give us and what type of time frame would we be looking at. But I agree, there's already existing process and channels for making the request for National Guard.
Right, because you in fact anticipated there might be some need based upon intelligence that your department was seeing. But on any given day, if a foreign terrorist organization decided to mount an attack on this complex, do the procedures exist and are the channels in place such that a quick reaction force can be mustered swiftly, such that someone in your position knows exactly who to call and they can do so without consulting with the sergeants at arms?
I think what you're saying is what we need to look at, because I'd still be to consult with the Sergeant at Arms to make the request for National Guard.
Okay, my time is running short, so I want to ask you this. What is the intelligence budget for the U.S. Capitol Police, and how many personnel do you have in the intelligence division, or did you have when you served as the chief?
I'd have to go back and pull that specific information. We have a number of intel analysts. We have a number of people that work there, both sworn and civilian. But I want to give you clear and accurate.
Yeah, approximately how many personnel are in the intelligence division,
I'd
please?
say approximately right around 30, 35 people.
30 or 35. And does the U.S. Capitol Police have the capacity to do any intelligence collection other than by making requests to executive branch agencies for raw intelligence or analysis?
Again, when you talk about intelligence collection, we're a consumer of intelligence from the intelligence community. I'm sorry. We do have the ability to go and look at like open source, see what people are talking about on open source, but going and collecting in-depth, specific intelligence is something that we're a consumer of from the intelligence community.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. I yield back.
Sir.
Well, thank you very much. That was our last set of questions, and we're going to conclude this hearing. I wanted to say a few words at the end. First of all, I want to thank Chairman Peters and Senators, ranking members,
and I'll pick up your phone calls on what you saw and heard and what you think about this. So feel free to give us a shout
we had
at
a bipartisan agreement on how this
202-808-9925.
hearing would be conducted, who our witnesses would be, and also the plan to have additional hearings, including one next week that we'll be announcing tomorrow with the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and the FBI, because clearly we have and our members have additional questions. I want to thank the witnesses, as I said, for voluntarily appearing before us. I want to thank Captain Mendoza for her moving words and bravery. In many ways, she represents all of the officers that were there that day. A few things that are very clear to me. The first is the statements at the beginning from all the witnesses. They may have disagreed on some details and, okay. But there is clear agreement that this was a planned insurrection. So, and I think most members here very firmly agree with that. I think it's important for the public to know that. This was planned. We now know that this was a planned insurrection. It involved white supremacists. It involved extremist groups. And it certainly could have been so much worse except for the bravery of the officers. Secondly, we learned about the intelligence breakdown. So many of the members of both committees asked about that, particularly the January 5th, the FBI report that had some very significant warnings from social media.
Summarizing, as soon as she's done, I'll pick up your phone calls and I'll give you my summary as well. So here's Senator Klobuchar.
The fact that did not get to key leaders in the Sergeant of Arms or the Capitol Police Chief is, of course, very disturbing, really on both ends. I mean, you can't just push send. As we all know, we get tons of emails and hope that it gets to the right person, especially when we're dealing with something so serious. The January 3rd intelligence report that came right out of the Capitol Police also contained, according to Washington Post reports and other information, some pretty foreboding details that I would have thought would have resulted in planning and more preparations. The delays in the approving a request for National Guard assistance, both from the Capitol Police Board and the Department of Defense. The fact that the Sergeant at Arms were focused on keeping the members safe in both chambers while the chief was trying to get some emergency approval. To me, you can point fingers, but you could also look at this as a process that is not prepared for a crisis. And I think out of that, there's some general agreement, just based on talking to a number of members, that there should be changes to the Capitol Police Board, the approval process, and the like. And it's clear that that action must be taken not only to protect our Capitol, but also to protect the brave officers charged with protecting the citadel of democracy. Better intelligence sharing, always an outcome when there's failures of intelligence. We know that, but I think we'll get more details in the coming week. Some security changes at the Capitol, requests that have been made for a while on those changes that I think we have to seriously consider. And no, it does not have to be barbed wire. And of course, this is a public building, and you want the school groups, and you want the veterans, and you want people to be able to visit here. But that doesn't mean that we don't make some smart security changes to this building. The use of the National Guard. We know after 9/11, the National Guard helped for quite a while. We also know that we have to have a plan going forward, as well as consider what happens when we need a greater number of National Guard in a crisis and how those approvals are made. Those are just some of my takeaways. I'm sure many others will have more, but I do want to make it clear that there are some items of agreement between most of us on this committee, and I don't think we should let the words of a few become the story here, because I think this has been a very constructive hearing, and I want to thank our witnesses for coming forward as they did. And I want to thank Senator Peters, and we look forward to more hearings. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair.
Peters, he's the chair of the Homeland Security Committee.
For your leadership. It's been good working with you and your entire team with the Rules Administration Committee. And certainly want to thank Ranking Member Blunt and Portman and all of the members who came here together today to work in a bipartisan way to ask tough questions and to get answers. I want to thank Captain Mendoza for sharing her experiences. Certainly a very powerful way to start this hearing. But I truly appreciate each of the witnesses that were here today, who came here today willingly and knew you would be asked tough questions, and you were willing to do that. And certainly we appreciate you for that effort. And while this hearing certainly shed some new light and offered some new information on what happened to the lead up, as well as to the response to the January 6th attack on our Capitol, it's also raised a number of additional questions that need to be asked. For the past 2 years, I've been working to draw attention to the rise of domestic terrorism, and specifically violence violence driven by white supremacists. We have only seen the threat of this violence grow, not just from white supremacists, but also from anti-government groups and people who have been swept up by conspiracy theories and just simple outright lies. The events of January 6th and the answers that we heard today only further highlight a grave national security threat that our current Homeland Security apparatus is clearly not fully equipped to address. Our national security agencies were overhauled and they were forged in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. And they're basically built around responding to foreign terrorist attacks. And they have been slow to adapt to this evolving threat of domestic terrorism that we have seen in the last few years. The Homeland Security Committee was created to oversee reforms to fix the intelligence failures that led to 9/11. And now I intend to ensure that this committee oversees efforts to fix the failures that led to the January 6th attack. There's no question our federal counterterrorism resources are not focused on effectively addressing the growing and deadly domestic terror threat. The January 6th attack marked a once-in-a-lifetime failure, and now we have the duty to ensure that the federal government is doing everything in its power to make sure another attack like this never happens again. We must align our counterterrorism resources and our intelligence gathering efforts to ensure we're focused on this dire threat. The FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the National Counterterrorism Center right now are 8 months late on a report to assess the threat posed by domestic terrorism. And we're going to continue to push them to complete this report as soon as possible so that we can take meaningful action. There's no question in my mind that there was a failure to take this threat more seriously, despite widespread social media content and public reporting that indicated violence was extremely likely. The federal government must start taking these online threats seriously to ensure they don't cross into the real world violence. I also plan to keep the pressure up on social media companies to work harder to ensure that their platforms are not used as a tool to organize violence. So this investigation does not end here today, and I look forward to our next hearing where we will continue to seek answers to important questions that were raised today and others that need to be answered. Before we adjourn, however, I have to do a bit of quick housekeeping. It's my privilege to announce the members of the subcommittees of the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee for the 117th Congress. The following senators will serve on the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations.
So this has been the Joint Oversight Committee. Let's discuss what we heard here right after this break. 202-808-9925.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Tom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. More info at teethhealth.com, code Tom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code Tom. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code Tom. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Tom.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms, in our fields, our streets and our sewers, our bodies and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until at last we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits in that secret a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer health care, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide health care to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest healthcare program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of healthcare. I believe this healthcare is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are healthcare. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer healthcare is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people, and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18, and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve needs a wheelchair to move and a ventilator to help him breathe. The book, Health Justice Now, Timothy Faust.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, it was a fascinating hearing. There was, a little bit of kind of boring back and forth and tit and tat and all that kind of stuff. But bottom line, the chief of the Capitol Police, Stephen Sund, says he reached out to his boss, the Sergeant at Arms, at 1:09 p.m. as the outer perimeter was being breached and said, "We need help. This is an emergency." And that guy testified today that he didn't remember the phone call. He's a former Secret Service guy. I don't remember the call. Somebody's lying. Something's going on here. Something's going on that's bigger than just what it appears on the surface. There's a lot of unanswered questions. We heard from Senator Ron Johnson, the Republican from Wisconsin, saying that this was an enthusiastic trial. Festive was the word that he used. And he read from some weird document from someplace, some person, some commentator, that this was, what was the phrase? That this was Antifa, that there were people of a variety of political perspectives, I think, though, that the broad consensus is that this was planned. Parts of this were a military operation, how the Robert Conte, the acting head of the D.C. Metro Police, described it. And, this was no mistake. This was no accident. The one thing that I didn't hear, and maybe I missed it because I didn't hear every thing that was said. There was parts of this hearing that went on before I came on the air that I missed, and there were moments when it was on the air when I was having to do other things here that I missed some of the testimony. But maybe you heard it. If so, let me know. But I didn't hear anybody say that they felt that Donald Trump was responsible for this, or even a softer way of saying that, which is that we never expected that the president would suggest to people that they should march down to the Capitol building, or words to that effect. So I'm wondering, what were the high and low points for you? Those broadly for me, I mean, the testimony of the one female police officer, and my apologies, I'm not recalling her name, and I wasn't in a position to write it down at the time, talking about how she still has chemical burns on her face as a result of being bear sprayed by the thugs in this crowd, and how she was treated. She's black, and how she was treated. Amy Klobuchar, in her closing remarks, pointed out that this was clearly a white supremacist crowd, that this was a racist crowd, that I would say this was a fascist crowd. Of course, this is what Donald Trump brought to American politics at the federal level, white supremacy, and has his whole entire life, from refusing to rent when he was running rentals for his father to black people back in the 60s, to calling for the execution of the Central Park Five when they were absolutely innocent and have been proved innocent. And in fact, somebody else has confessed to the crime. He still holds to that, to claiming that Barack Obama could not possibly be a legitimate president because obviously he couldn't have been born in the United States. He's got to be a stalking horse put into place by what? The Soviet Union? God only knows. To, tearing brown children from their parents and putting them in cages for years and then just giving them away, losing them, selling them off to the highest bidder. God only knows. So I see this as a beginning. I thought it was a fairly weak beginning in that everybody was trying to retain bipartisanship and nobody was willing, as far as I could tell. And again, I'll pick up your phone calls in just a second. We've got the whole hour to talk about this. But it didn't seem like anybody was really saying what I think is the real issue, which is that the Republican Party and Donald Trump as its exemplar, the Republican Party has become, over the last 40 years, the party of lies. This is how they govern, right? They just, they lied to us about COVID. They said it was just like the flu and like magic, it would soon disappear. Well, that nearly killed my best friend, as I write about over on Medium.com. They lied to us about voter fraud. And they're passing, now you've got over 200 pieces of legislation in 31 states right now being considered that will make it harder for people to vote, particularly people who live in big cities, particularly people who are black or Hispanic or Native American. They lied to us about trickle-down economics so that they could hang on to all their money. They lied to us about who won the 2020 election, and Trump started this lie. In fact, he started it even before the election was held, saying that if he lost, it had to be voter fraud. And now his Republican co-conspirators against democracy continue to echo this lie. You had Stephen Scalise, the number 2 Republican in the House of Representatives, the guy who, when he was running for the House of Representatives from Louisiana, said that he was David Duke without the baggage, right? David Duke without the hood. Refusing to say that Joe Biden won in a free and fair election. This is now the position of at least 150 of the Republicans in the House of Representatives. It's broadly become the position of the entire Republican Party, and certainly is the position of the leader of the Republican Party, Ronna Romney McDaniel. So they lied to us about the January 2020 election, and that lie led right to the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. They lied to us saying that student debt builds character, when in fact it's preventing young people from buying homes, starting businesses, and starting families. They lied to us that America has the best healthcare system in the world, when in reality tens of thousands of Americans die unnecessarily every year for lack of access to healthcare, and we have the worst infant and maternal mortality death rates in the world. They lied to us that guns keep us safe, when in reality they've produced an epidemic of school shootings and suicides. They lied to us that tax cuts for billionaires and big corporations were the best way to help out the little guy. They lied to us that unions hurt working people. They lied to us about global warming, saying it's caused by natural phenomena, when their buddies and campaign donors are making trillions in profits pumping carbon into our atmosphere. They lied to us about massive military spending, greater than the next 10 nations combined, saying, well, that provides security to our people. But a national health care system, free college education, decent wages for workers, those don't provide security. You got to have military. They lied to us that a robust minimum wage hurts businesses, when all around the world, countries with much higher minimum wages than ours have vibrant economies. And our own economy, in fact, was at its best in the 1960s, when the minimum wage, if you were inflation adjusted to today's dollars, would be about $18 an hour. They have brought us lies that have amplified racism. They have brought us lies that have amplified misogyny, the hatred of women. They have brought us lies that have impoverished our working class over 40 years. They have brought us lies that have brought us a dirtier environment. They have brought us lies that have seen our public lands being sold off to their donor cronies in the extractive industries, in the mining industries, in the oil, coal, and gas industries. And they have lied to us in a way that has left an entire generation, I'd say 2 generations now, of young people, the 2 most recent generations, paralyzed by student debt. And then on top of that, this big lie about COVID has led to 500,000 dead Americans, more than all the people who died in World War I, who died in World War II, who died in the Iraq War, who died in the Vietnam War, who died in the Afghanistan War, who died in the Grenada War, who died in all our little wars, in Libya and in, our illegal wars during Reagan, in Grenada, in Honduras and El Salvador and Guatemala. Add all those dead Americans together since the beginning of the 20th century. And Donald Trump's lies about COVID and his Republican co-conspirators who continue to pitch these lies, like Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, have killed more than 500,000 of us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Anyhow, enough of my rant. We'll pick up your phone calls right after this. And welcome back. Hunter in Mesa, Arizona. Hey, Hunter, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's on your mind today?
Well, you just said a mouthful there. I agree with most of what you said there. Let's see, on the hearings today, one thing I don't understand is where was Secret Service? As far as anytime I've been around any presidents, Clinton, Secret Service is all over the place, and it's hard to believe that. And then I never hear them ever mention Kamala Harris. Where was she at, and what happened to her? It's all about the vice president, and I find it really hard to believe that they let that crowd get that close to the vice president. And so to me, once again, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it does sound like it was set up to happen that way. As far as the police and protection being all set down.
Well, that was another thing I didn't hear, Hunter. And I was waiting to hear somebody bring this up. And I know these hearings are going to continue as time goes along. But I want to know why Donald Trump put Christopher Miller in charge of the Defense Department after he lost his job, after Donald Trump lost the election. Why did he put Chris Miller in charge as the acting Secretary of Defense? And then why did Chris Miller issue this memo saying that you may not defend the Capitol, you may to the DC National Guard without my specific permission. You may not give helmets or tear gas to the Capitol Police. You may not assist them in any kind of police function. You may not help them arrest anybody. You may not assist them in crowd control. I mean, the memo's out there. I've published a copy of it. It's not only is nobody disputing it, it's now been authenticated. Why was nobody saying, why was this stand-down order issued by the acting Secretary of Defense, the guy that Trump handpicked to put in there after he lost the election? It stinks to me, Hunter.
Yes, it does. And that's why, and the way Trump just automatically said, January 6th, be there, it'll be wild. And I mean, the minute he said that, I was watching TV, the minute he said it live, and I knew what he meant, and I knew it was coming, and it all came true. And, and so that makes me very suspicious. And when you hear Ron Johnson sit there and try to turn it around and blame it on Pelosi, and it's an inside job that way, no, that's just, double speak, That guy is so sad.
Well, Ron Johnson has been amplifying, foreign propaganda, Russian and other foreign propaganda, as far as I can tell, his entire career.
Yeah, he came into office just getting rid of Russ Feingold and all the Koch brother money and everything was to do that. Because Russ Feingold at least was trying to do campaign finance, one of the best senators ever. And it's so sad. Another thing, when you go back to the stuff you were talking about, besides the hearing today about the Republicans and the 40 years, if people will really go back in history and look at the connections of Allen Dulles and J. Edgar Hoover, and then now you look in the past and see what they really were about. You're right. 40 years these guys have been lying to us. Conspiracy theory. was the coined phrase by Alan Dulles.
And longer in some ways.
Yeah, of course, longer. Yeah, it was before. Anyway, we go on and on. But
no,
thank you.
I'm with you. Hunter, I'm sorry we're out of time, but I got to run. Yeah, thanks for the call. It's not new, but it still is something we need to hold to account. We'll be right back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Astonishing news out of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that has to do with the lifespan of Americans. Since World War II, the average lifespan of American men and women have continuously increased, all the way up to 78.8 years in 2019. Continuous increase. Things were getting better, more and more people were getting health care, we were making medical technology advances, there was a rather dramatic decline in smoking between the 1990s and the 2010s. All kinds of things were working together. And then came Donald Trump's response to COVID-19. Causing America, with 4% of the world's population, to have 20% of the world's deaths. The result of that has been extraordinary. For the first time since World War II, American life expectancy has declined. It's all over in a new video for supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. We're talking about these hearings, what we just saw, what we just heard, what's going on, what does it all mean, what are the consequences of it. Russell in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Hey, Russell, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I'm just a contractor here, but I was watching on the 6th, and, from the very start of it, I said, where's the police? Where's the police? Where's the police? And for the longest time, there weren't any police. And then when they finally got a handle on it, my thought was, why didn't they quadrant off the entrances to the Capitol, and every single writer who left, name, address, if you didn't give it to us, we're taking you away. And they had... Or
throw them in a paddy wagon.
Exactly. I mean,
it's not like they don't have enough buses to arrest people there. I mean, but look at what they did back during the Women's March. Look at what they've done during anti-war marches. They bring buses in, they kettle people, they subdue them, they drag them off by the hundreds.
And the thing that gets me the most is, after listening to the hearings just now, it's really heavy on policy and it's heavy on our training and everything, but why wasn't there at least one or two high-level police officers whose only job is to gauge what's going on? And in the moment they see things getting out of hand, they have the power to say, I'm the point man. There is something going on here. We got to take care of it. And it smacks me of a conspiracy.
Yeah, I agree, Russell. And on top of that, it's not like this was happening in a vacuum in Somalia or something, or in Guatemala. I mean, this was going on national television. And still, it took 4 or 5 hours for the Secretary of Defense to finally say, okay, I authorize some help. Chris Miller, the acting Secretary of Defense, did not authorize the National Guard until after people were leaving the building. I mean, tell me that doesn't stink.
The top level people, everybody who was had anything to do with this, they need to be held accountable, removed from their job, bring new people in, because I'm a contractor. If I did my business the way they are supposed to do their business, I'd be, nobody would use me ever. I mean, I really, I'm just, I'm so angry and I'm so frustrated about this whole entire situation.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. Russell, thank you for sharing that with us. Alan in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Alan, what's up?
Yeah, I was watching the hearings too, and I'm a Desert Storm veteran, Desert Storm in Somalia, and we've had, my family members have had a person participate in every single conflict this country's had dating back to the Buffalo Soldiers. And this is really my question to the veterans for Trump. I'm just curious of what the problem is, and also on top of the hearings, a dog and pony show I saw today. That's why the previous caller was frustrated, because that's what we call in the military a dog and pony show, trying to pass the buck and not trying to take responsibility for what's popping. And I think we kind of got a good idea. And I'm very disappointed that even people with, some so-called PhDs and all this stuff, all this education, they want to insult individuals like this. It's unbelievable. It really is. It's shocking to me to watch how individuals are just passing the buck and not taking responsibility. But thanks, man, and I appreciate everything you do, Tom, and peace out, big man.
Thank you, Alan. I am very much looking forward to the day when the acting Secretary of Defense, who had put out the do not respond order, essentially, is hauled before Congress, and I'd like to see some serious questioning and some aggressive questioning. This was very, very kid gloves. Ron in Berrien Springs, Michigan. Hey, Ron, what's up?
Tom, the buses that brought the white supremacists to attack the Capitol. Clarence Thomas's wife, I understand she organized 200 buses. There's a woman from Michigan who admitted she organized buses from Michigan. We have to find out who paid for it. Those people got back on those buses, I imagine. So the police
hang on just a second, Ron. That was for what? Now, Ginny Thomas's organization, the Women for whatever it was, the Women for Liberty or something, they put on that rally that Trump spoke at. They were promised in writing and repeatedly verbally that they were not going to go anywhere else, that it was just going to be a rally. And Trump came in, and I think that they planned this the night before at this meeting at the Trump Hotel, and nobody's talking about that either. And Trump came in and said, no, let's go charge the Capitol, or let's march to the Capitol, we all know, and fight and, all this kind of stuff. And so I don't know that Ginny Thomas is complicit or, was suckered into this thing and is now, hiding under a desk someplace. I don't know. But I find it hard to believe that she thought this is how it was going to play out.
This is our Smedley Butler moment. Either we investigate and we root out the financiers, the money people who organize this terrorist organization, just like going back to World War II, or it continues. Stop it now, or it just continues.
Yeah, I completely agree. And with Smedley Butler, what Franklin Roosevelt did is he quashed the investigation. He stopped the Senate investigation. He refused to have any deeper investigation because he was afraid it would give people ideas. Well, I get that, but I think the people already have the ideas now. We need to figure this out. We'll be right back. It's 20 coming up on 28 minutes past the hour.
Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We're talking about the hearings this morning and the treason. I don't know what else to call this. The treason that happened on January 6th. We're reading today from Truth in Our Times by David E. McCraw, Deputy General Counsel of the New York Times, the #2 lawyer for the New York Times. This is in Chapter 1, titled Election Day. It opens with a tweet from Donald Trump. The failing New York Times has been wrong about me from the very beginning. Sadly, I would lose the primaries. Oh, said I would lose the primaries on the general election. Fake news. November 8, 2016. At 10 p.m., I made one last circuit of the newsroom. Our CEO, Mark Thompson, stood near the political desk, looking on with his wife and a small group of others connected somehow to the Times. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan remained in doubt, but the reality was sinking in. Donald Trump was on the verge of winning the American presidency. I'd been in newsrooms on election nights before. I know how it's supposed to be. The only thing that ever mattered was the horse race, think Gore-Bush, or the historic moment, think Obama-McCain. There was no investment in which candidate was winning. He or she was destined to disappoint in the long run. And the dominant emotion was a certain not quite cynical detachment amid the electric buzz of the vote count and projections and the anticipation of relief that the endless push of the campaign was finally over. Sure, you couldn't ignore the victories or the big picture moments, and the day after stories would be celebratory in their way, duly restrained but with a nod to victory itself. Not unlike the next day account of a Super Bowl game or Game 7 of the World Series. Capture the triumph for a night or relish the race too close to call? Leave the dancing and crying for others, for the believers. But this night was like no other election night. There had been an investment, not just journalistic, but spiritual. Donald Trump had campaigned not just against Hillary Clinton, but also against the New York Times and the American press, the mainstream American press. And his astonishing rise to the top of the Republican Party had been built on his near daily attacks on facts, on the very idea that facts matter. For journalists who approach truth like a secular religion and who have seen 1,000 times how a single true story could gut the political career of a lying politician, it had been a year of faith-shaking disbelief. A line had not just been crossed, but obliterated. The shock was palpable as the numbers came in, laced for some with the fading hope for a different outcome among people who generally wanted nothing more than a story worth telling. And there was still a paper to put out, a reckoning to account for. It was too much on an already long night. I slipped away. At the elevators, I ran into Sue Craig and a guy who was obviously not from the Times. Sue had broken one of the biggest stories of the campaign. She was the one who went to her mailbox one day in September and found pages from Donald Trump's tax returns in an envelope. She introduced me to her acquaintance. He had once worked for Trump. I didn't ask why he was there. Like me, Sue had decided to get away. "It's too weird here," she said. We all got on the elevator. Sue, who had written a devastating story about Trump, me, whose letter to Trump's lawyers had lit up the internet for a week in October, and one of Trump's guys. We rode in silence, a strange tableau on the strangest night of the year. 14 hours earlier, as I came into the building, the Times security guard had called me over. They wanted to make sure I knew about the plans for the next morning. In the quirky ways that things happen at the Times, I had become the lawyer to see for all the things that security guys encountered, from the intruder who pilfered women's shoes to the anonymous letter weaponized with razor blades. The Times was printing thousands of extra newspapers, and tables were going to be set up outside for all the people who would be showing up to buy the New York Times for posterity's sake. The headline, I later learned, was going to read, "Madam President." We had been caught flat-footed 8 years earlier when Barack Obama had made history. By the time I arrived for work early in the morning of the 2008 election, the line was already starting to snake down the sidewalk. Soon there were hundreds of Obama supporters who thought, and why wouldn't they, that the place to buy a copy of the New York Times was surely at the New York Times. Lots of things happen at the Times building. Selling newspapers is not one of them. Employees were pressed into emergency duty to cart bundles of newspapers from the Times printing plant in Queens, and the long lines outside the building stretched on into the afternoon. But it was Obama's victory in 2012 that was on my mind this morning. I vote in a neighborhood that is predominantly black and middle class. In 2012, following a drumbeat of stories about how Republicans hoped to suppress voter turnout, I walked into my polling place at a local school 8 minutes after it opened. The line already extended back to the schoolhouse door. "Did y'all sleep here?" a guy wanted to know as he stepped into the foyer. On this morning in 2016, I had arrived before dawn. I was the only one in line at my precinct's table. That all seemed like a strangely distant memory as midnight approached. I had made my escape from the building with Sue and the Trump guy. At home, I sat alone in the glow of the TV screens as the states that mattered fell into place for the Republicans. I turned it off. Donald Trump was about to become president of the United States. The next morning, in a light drizzle on a gray November day, the newspaper sales tables were set up outside the building as planned. No one stopped. The vendors sat idly amid the stacks. There was no Madam President front page. Instead, the headline read, "Trump Triumphs," and the first two paragraphs of the lead story talked about how the vote threatened convulsions throughout the country and made an early mention of those who had watched with alarm the rise of Trump. Nearly half the country had voted for the man. I had just spent a weekend in October back in rural Illinois, in my hometown, and for a moment I allowed myself to see the coverage through the eyes of the rest of America, where, at least for this one night, his victory represented a certain kind of hope that change was going to come at last. Truth in Our Times by David McCraw. On the Science Revolution this week, Dr. Michael Mann drops by about our fossil fuel addiction and how it's leading to bombs, cyclones, and famines. If the recent wild weather is any forecast of what's to come, we need to get our carbon emissions under control quickly. As the jet stream to our north and the Gulf Stream to our east continue to wobble and weaken, Weather patterns that enable us to predictably grow food and maintain a habitable lifestyle are collapsing. This severe winter weather is a warning and will become civilization threatening and eventually could even bring down the whole human species. The crisis is now. Tune into The Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We are discussing the joint oversight hearing on the security failures with regard to the attack on January 6th on the Capitol building that were conducted by jointly between the Senate Homeland Security Committee, whose chair is Senator Gary Peters, the Democrat from Michigan, and the Senate Rules and Administration Committee, whose chair is Senator Amy Klobuchar, the Democrat from Minnesota. And, you know, what does this all mean? What does this say? Where do we go from here? Did we learn anything today? You know, all that kind of stuff. And what's next? Heather in Salt Lake City, Utah. Hey, Heather, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Thom Hartmann. I listened to your show. I was a Democrat, but I'm now independent. I live in Salt Lake. I am LDS. And I was listening to your show today, and I really think that we should work on getting people back to work and giving them unemployment checks or something, because these people are becoming homeless at an astonishing rate. They're losing their cars. It's horrific. And it
I agree.
saddens my heart that this is happening.
That's the legislation that the Democrats are going to drop in the House and the Senate, I believe, next Monday, and I think they're planning on having a vote by the end of the week.
These people, a car payment is due on the 1st. Your rent is due on the 1st. It doesn't care whether somebody wrote something for the 15th or the 20th. It's due on the 1st. And if this isn't
and March 1st. And March 1st is the day that the long-term unemployment benefits that were extended in, I think it was November, just before the election, in fact. I think that was when they finally got that extension, because they were supposed to expire at the end of the year. And then they extended it until March 1st.
I agree with what Biden's
I think
doing.
they're going to get that done, Heather.
I really don't like the guy, but I agree with what he's doing. I think we need to do something about the greenhouse
You're talking about
emissions.
Biden?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you were saying. Forgive my interruption.
I'm sorry. I'm talking too fast. I lived in the Northeast, and my voice just goes everywhere.
No, it's good, Heather. You were saying you don't like the guy, but you think we need to do something about greenhouse emissions. And I didn't know if you were talking about like your Senator
Biden. No, I don't. I think he's going to take my religious freedoms away.
And what religious freedom would that be?
I'm LDS, Latter-day Saint, a Mormon.
Right. So how does Biden take away your religious freedom?
Because he wants to he probably wants to tax churches. He wants to tax everybody.
I've never heard him say that. He's Catholic. I mean, he's fanatically Catholic.
I know he's Catholic.
I've never heard him say that.
He and his wife are Catholic. I know that.
Right.
And you know. And so, but anyway,
but see, if the LDS Church, Heather,
people harassing me, think somebody hacked my account. They didn't hack my account. I am just conservative now. I'm not Democrat anymore. And they
no, I get it, Heather. If the churches were to be taxed, if churches were to lose, and I think the LDS Church would probably be at the back of the line on this. I think your televangelists, your Protestant televangelists, and your Protestant evangelical churches would probably be the ones who have violated the law in that they are actively advocating politics from the pulpit and therefore would lose their tax-exempt status if I had my way. Now, Joe Biden, to the best of my knowledge, has not mentioned this, but all a church has to do to not pay any taxes at all, even if they're no longer tax-exempt, is not show a profit at the end of the year. And the way they do that is by taking whatever surplus money they have and doing what Jesus said, giving it to the poor.
Russell M. Nelson, which is our prophet, the church has a lot of money, but the money is used and was gained by people like me who tithe. I tithe 10%, and it's used to build temples and chapels, and it's used to help people who are homeless and destitute.
Yeah, and even if there's no tax exemption, the church doesn't have to pay taxes on any of that money. as long as it's not sitting on piles of cash, as long as it's not sitting on a money bid. But I think we've digressed here considerably, Heather. And I just, to the best of my knowledge, Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, nobody in the, I talked about this a couple days ago that I think churches should be taxed. But, my opinion is an extreme minority. So I don't think you have to worry about Joe Biden and the LDS Church. But Heather, thank you for your calls. I agree with you. We should be feeding people. We should be providing people with health care. We should be providing people with free education. And many of those things are the values of the LDS Church, of the Mormons. And so, tip of the hat to them. Uli in Teaneck, New Jersey. Hey, Uli, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Tom. Wie geht's, wie steht's?
Yeah, thank you. Feeling good, Dank.
Good. On the 6th of January, I was talking to a friend of mine in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And that was at the time when the storming of the Capitol started. And he was watching it also. And he was going, they're storming the Capitol. How can this happen on a day like this when the certification of Joe Biden is going on and there's no security? This is a complete joke. And I've spoken to other people, I have friends in Austria and, family in Germany. They're all saying the same thing. How can this happen to the most important building in America? How this can happen that people just walk in with no security?
I think it happened because the Secretary of Defense that Donald Trump put into place a couple of days after he lost the election said to the D.C. National Guard, after the mayor of D.C. said, we need help. We're going to need help here. There's going to be, something's going to happen. And it's not like it was a secret. I mean, CNN was reporting it a month in advance. Donald Trump was tweeting, it's going to be wild. Well, you'd think that they would be there. But the Secretary of Defense that Donald Trump put into place issued a memo saying, no, you can't go until I say you can go. And he didn't say you can go until 5 or 6 hours into this assault. I'm with you, Uli. This was a setup.
The other thing is, I'm still not clear who is responsible for sending the National Guard. I mean, it looks like one person is pushing to the other. There's confusion here and there. I don't get it.
Yeah. What we saw this morning, I think, was a lot of finger pointing and a lot of buck passing, and I am very hopeful that we do not tolerate a continuation of that. So I'm with you. Uli, thank you for the call. Brian in Illinois. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
You've already touched on my point several times. I was wondering if they're planning on calling Chris Miller to testify. He seems like he might actually have a lot to say. He gave an interview with Vanity Fair, I don't know, about 2 weeks
about
after.
a month ago.
Yeah, saying that, he was thrown under the bus and all this. Even if he wants to go up there and, spread some disinformation, that would be perjury, right? So, I mean, are they able to get him up there?
They should be. Congress has the power to enforce subpoenas. Now, there's a whole bunch of subpoenas that they, laid out for the Trump administration that still haven't been executed. Right. They're so far behind. But I think that one of the and this, just to possibly cut these senators some slack here, Brian, it's conceivable. And this is just a guess on my part. Let me just put this right out here. This is not an informed opinion. I haven't talked to any member of Congress about this. But it's entirely possible that the reason why Peters and Klobuchar, Gary Peters and Amy Klobuchar, the two committee chairs who basically ran this hearing today, that the reason why they didn't go for the jugular as aggressively as probably you or I would have liked them to do is that yesterday Merrick Garland, who prosecuted Tim McVeigh. I mean, he's got experience prosecuting right-wing terrorism in the United States, domestic terrorism in the United States. And he was the lead prosecutor. He pulled that case together. He nailed Terry Nichols, in addition to Tim McVeigh. And Tim McVeigh got the death penalty for that, as you'll recall. And that Merrick Garland, during that hearing yesterday, was asked, in fact, he was asked by Sheldon Whitehouse, the senator from Connecticut, as I recall, He was asked specifically, will you go above the heads of these people? Will you go to the people who were not there on January 6th, who were not at the Capitol, but helped organize this or helped fund this? And he said, absolutely. And you know, in another moment in the hearing, there was that extraordinary moment where he said that his parents came to the United States fleeing anti-Semitism, and he has been devoted his life to public service. The guy's a brilliant lawyer. He could be making $3 million a year at a white, white stocking, a silk stocking, white shoe law firm in D.C. or New York, and instead he's chosen to take a civil service salary his whole entire life. But he said, I am doing this as payback for this country, giving refuge to my family. And so maybe what's happening is that Peters and Klobuchar don't want to get ahead of the FBI. They don't want to get ahead of the Justice Department. They want to wait for that stuff to come out in a way that is based on good, solid, legal, investigations. Now, that's just speculation.
Yeah, maybe.
But that's the most benign explanation I can come up with. Brian, I got to run, but I'm sorry. Thank you. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
Listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Bill in Seattle. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I'd like to nominate Josh Hawley for Hypocrite of the Year. Considering he encouraged the insurrection, how did he end up on the commission investigating the fiasco?
He's a member of the Oversight Committee, and Ted Cruz is a member of the Homeland Security Committee, if I'm remembering correctly. This was a joint committee hearing. And these two committees, Homeland Security and Senate Rules and Administration, and so that's who those are the people who were on those two things. But him and Ted Cruz were the two guys who voted, who gave floor speeches, essentially saying, "Oh yeah, the election was stolen from Donald Trump." They voted against certifying Joe Biden as president. They are major participants in the stabbed in the back big lie, which is just a clone of Hitler's stabbed in the back big lie that took him to power, where he said that it was, Jews and communists and socialists who basically forced Germany to capitulate in World War I when Germany was actually winning the war, don't you know? It's even the same kind of lie, broadly speaking. So I'm with you, Bill. These guys are hypocrites. What's the phrase? On steroids. So yeah, Bill. Thanks a lot for the call. Good to hear from you. Yep, thank you, Brian in Salem, Oregon. Hey, Brian, what's up?
How you doing, Tom? Longtime listener, loyal listener.
Thank you.
But you just kind of answered my question with one of your earlier callers just now about why it was such a softball kind of questioning in the hearing today.
That's just speculation.
Because, well, I know, but you kind of hit the nail on the head, I think, because I would ask those guys who has permission or the authority to put in panic buttons in these senators and representatives' offices, and then who has the authority to take them out, and who took them out.
Specifically, Ayanna Pressley, yes.
Yeah, so you a specific question like that, and, well, I don't know. They should know, right?
Yeah, you would think.
Something like that? Well, that just proves an inside job, doesn't it?
In my mind, there had, and keep in mind, there are, I believe, 65 Capitol Police officers who are under investigation right now for letting people in, for taking selfies with them, for wearing MAGA paraphernalia. Apparently we have an enemy within, to paraphrase a famous phrase from the 1950s. And it's not just within the Capitol Police Department. It's also in every police department in America. We have white supremacists and bigots. In the military, we have a growing white supremacist movement and an anti-government movement. And the anti-government folks are also in our police departments. And then we've got this entire, the Oath Keepers. We used to have Sheriff Mack on this program regularly. One of the Oath Keeper guys back before everybody realized how insanely toxic they were. And I would debate him about the proper role of government and, do sheriffs really, this kind of thing. But that's a movement that apparently, they were providing security to Roger Stone before that. That's a movement that apparently played a major role in this. And they're entirely made out of former police officers and military. I mean, you have to be that in order to even qualify for membership. So I really think the enemy within is here. Brian, thank you for the call. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a second. You can find an absolutely fascinating library of my writings, including my daily rants, over at thomhartmann.medium.com. Well, most of them are fascinating. We should re-record that. Anyhow, welcome back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour, picking up your calls and your thoughts on, what we saw today and heard today with these hearings. Jim in Detroit and Pontiac, actually, Michigan. Hey, Jim, what's up? Are you in Detroit or Pontiac?
That's my area code. Actually, I'm in Vieira, Florida. I haven't changed my cell phone.
Ah, okay. I'm sorry. Our call screener apparently hasn't been asking people. So where are you in Florida?
Vieira, Florida, which is right outside of Melbourne.
Okay.
Anyway,
I just fixed that, so we'll know next time.
Okay. Thank you for everything you do. A couple of other callers in previous shows have alluded to the fact that Mike Pence, being the vice president, also has a contingent of military with him that carries the football, a second football.
Right.
Which means that they have heavily armed guards around them at all times, which is also something that Donald Trump obviously knows. So what about the possibility that he encouraged many of his followers to go in and go after Mike Pence, knowing full well that if they had gotten anywhere close to him or that football, those armed guards would have pulled out automatic weapons and wiped out many, many of them, dozens, maybe even 100, who knows. And that would be something that Donald Trump could use in future rallies, is hold all those people up as martyrs. It's just, I wouldn't put anything past Trump at all, nothing. It just occurs to me that's what kind of a maniac he really is. He could have done something like that.
Yeah. Same here. It certainly appears that Trump, we knew, it was not a secret. It was on live television that there was a gallows outside the Capitol building, that people were looking to hang Mike Pence. Trump had to know that. There was lots of intelligence inside the building. There are cameras and microphones everywhere in the Capitol building. He's president of the United States. If he didn't know what was going on and what these people were thinking and what they were planning and who they were going after, I just don't find it credible. I don't find it possible. So the idea that he actually thought if his mob killed Mike Pence, that might be the ticket to his continuing as president for another 4 years, I don't think is so far outside the realm of possibility. It's not something that, mainstream commentators are fond of pointing out, but they allude to it kind of in metaphor frequently. So, Jim, I'm with you. Thank you very much for the call. Michael in Cocoa, Florida. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hi, Mr. Hartmann. My question is, the sergeants of arms of both the House and the Senate testified today, and what I heard from them, it really kind of meant that the decision for the National Guard or additional police, or specifically the National Guard, was their decision. It didn't really go over to the leadership and wasn't even discussed on January 4th or on the 6th. It was mentioned, as it was happening, but it wasn't something where there was accountability. And we went back and forth with this word optics, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts were. Do you think that McConnell or Nancy Pelosi knew about these requests for additional security? Or, where's the accountability? I mean, I hear this theory that you're thinking that the acting Secretary of Defense had a stand-down order, and somehow this infiltrated down to the military, to the National Guard, not to get involved, to whatever generals or whatever. But I'm just looking at the House and protecting themselves, knowing that they've got this, several thousand mega rally out there, and that when you watched it, it wasn't that many police along the perimeter. I mean, they were like one or two deep with those bicycle stands. So it looked a little weak as someone trying to be looking this critically. And then to hear the testimony today, say, okay, they looked credible, they looked honest. But it seems to me after 9/11, for all the fortification that city went through, that there would be more than that, and that only those 3 or 4 gentlemen were the ones in charge of the entire security, and it didn't go. So, are we being told, look over here and not look at Nancy, or look over here and not look at McConnell? Is that what this is all about?
Well, both Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell were calling everybody they could to get security. And by the way, Kevin McCarthy, the leader of the Republicans in the House, called Donald Trump himself and begged for help. He said, they're smashing the windows to my office. They're coming to get me. And Donald Trump said, well, I guess they're more upset about the election than you are, Kevin. I mean, that's, that is out there and is not being disputed by anybody.
My question for you is, do you feel prior, when they were talking January 4th, and the guy said, I heard them cross-examine and say, what about this optics? And he kept coming back.
Oh, I don't think Pelosi or McConnell were involved in those discussions. I think they just assume that the Capitol Police and the Secret Service are going to keep them all safe.
Well, it just appears that she's being absolved from any responsibility whatsoever, and then we're hearing
Nancy Pelosi?
Yeah,
I don't think she has any responsibility whatsoever here. She's not in charge. I mean, yes, she has oversight over the Capitol Police, but, you hire a police department and then you assume that they're going to do their job. Michael, I'm not willing to blame this on Nancy Pelosi. Jim in Minneapolis. Hey, Jim, you got 30 seconds. What's up?
I was wondering if they also have to safeguard against a Valkyrie-type operation where, supposedly Trump has this rally, but he also calls out the National Guard on his side, and I don't know why they shouldn't have both safeguards for that and an actual effective security system for the.
So Capitol. You mean, are you saying, Jim, that you think that it's possible that the Capitol Police were afraid that if the National Guard came, they would come on behalf of Trump and make things worse?
I'm just saying that you have to have safeguards, so that's not possible.
Right.
Like they did when they assassinated Hitler. A big part of that was Valkyrie. I get it. We need to dig a lot deeper in this. Jim, thanks for your call. And thank you for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active. There's so much to speak out about today. Tag you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Tom. Teeth. Smarter Pet Dental Help. More info at teethhealth.com, code TOM. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM.